Yeah.
So Arthur,
Yeah.
let's get rolling. We've got a big agenda, as you said. So if you've just dialed in, thank you for joining us. I can see others still joining in. We will use the chat function and the Q&A function if people do have questions or they do have chats, and we'll try and keep in touch with that. If you've got questions just for the panelists, you can send that through. There's a little blue box in the chat window on panelists, or all panelists and attendees. So if you're there, you can kind of send different questions. We have got an amazing lineup of speakers. So my name's Paul Newnham. I am the coordinator for the Chefs Manifesto, and this is our London Action Hub event being brought to you by Omved Gardens and Chefs Manifesto. And Arthur, do you want to introduce yourself just for people that are dialing in?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Chef Arthur Potts Dawson. I am the executive chef at Omved Gardens. Omved Gardens are co-hosting this event. The London Action Hub is Omved Gardens, where we host a lot of these events. This is our quarterly kind of big event. We've moved on from the summer, which is more of a migration and movement discussion, which we had over a number of days. But today we're talking about resilience, resilient ingredients, resilient people, resilient communities, and resilient planet. So we have got farmers, we've got scientists, we've got chefs, we've got pre-records, we've got live, we've got recipes. I've got stinging nettles here. I've got risotto cooking, which I'm going to show everybody in about 20 minutes time. And so, yeah, Paul, it's just been fantastic. It's almost sort of, this is our last event of the year for the Chefs Manifesto. We're tied in a little bit with the World Food Programme today as well to get a message out from a school in Benin, West Africa. So we have got stories, we've got chefs, scientists, soil, stinging nettles, and more.
It's awesome. And so there's a whole bunch of people dialing in. So if you're just dialed in, please in the chat, just let us know where you're coming from. So I can see we have already people dialing in from Malaysia, from India, from Nepal. I'm in Melbourne, Australia. We have obviously people in the UK. So we've got a real global audience already. I think I can see people that are in Nairobi. So if you're there, Philippines, Ireland, Colombia. So we've got already most continents of the world covered here. And so this is super awesome. So the topic we're talking about today is resilience. And so Arthur, do you want to just explain why resilience? Why is this is part of a 6-part series that's been going on. Why resilience? Why are we talking resilience at the moment, particularly at this point in time that we're in?
Yeah. Well, from the Chefs Manifesto perspective and chefs from all over the world, we've been talking all year since we started with the coronavirus issues, when we went into lockdown, and then we went into all of these kind of cultural, community, social issues that we're facing around business, around agriculture, around even picking stuff, strawberries, asparagus, rhubarb, everything that really needs people hands-on to pick couldn't be picked. We had food going soft in the ground. We couldn't get it all out. We had milk going to waste. We just couldn't deliver milk to the processing plants, and we were wasting a lot of food. And so suddenly something struck me and a lot of other chefs, which was, we're not geared up for this. We have got no capacity to deal with the stresses and the flexes and the issues that we face as a food system. Whether it's a drought in East Africa, whether it's locusts in Kenya, whether it's flooding in South America, whether it's war-torn places, Venezuela or Syria, South Sudan. We're looking at issues around food that are being exacerbated by both climate change and man-made issues. So many of the issues we're facing are man-made. And so, one of the most striking things is that we are discussing sustainability. Sustainability is a massive issue with food, and the Sustainable Development Goals, of which the SDG 2 Advocacy Hub, Paul is the leader of. We look at the Sustainable Development Goals, and they seem to stretch out over 10 or 15 years. Oh, it's a generational thing. Sustainability, we'll get it right one day. But resilience, we need to deal with resilient things now. We need resilient people, resilient agricultural communities, resilient customers, people who are ready to flex with the issues that we've got in the food system. So, this is the 6th event that we're hosting. We've been weekly with chefs from all over the world, talking about fonio, talking about millet, talking about bambara nuts, talking about seaweed. Today I'm talking about stinging nettles. We're talking about ingredients that can be identified that both culturally, but also edibly, they've been involved for millennia, thousands of years. And I think that we need to look at our food systems and understand that in these difficult times, we need to be more resilient. And we're going to talk a little bit about it socially, what the impact has on people and these types of environments. So today is about resilience and how chefs and the general public can make a difference. But we're going to listen to farmers, we're going to listen to producers, we're going to listen to scientists, we're going to listen to people who are going to tell us actually resilience, regenerative agriculture, what are the future of foods looking like, and how can we get engaged with it? Because resilience is, we need to be resilient right now.
Yeah. And I think this is super, super exciting. And it's great to have such a diverse group of people coming together and collaborating, because I think if we've got any chance of hitting the SDGs, we actually need to accelerate action, and action needs to be accelerated from all corners. You know, we need this to be something that engages. You mentioned consumers, people eating, the choices they're making, thinking about resilience. And so that's what this is about. And the last few weeks have been a way of kind of bringing in chef voices around that, looking at these ingredients. And this today is going to go deeper, and it's going to go deeper, and it's going to go broader in terms of bringing in other voices that chefs need to collaborate with, partner with, learn from, but also engage with around this. And so it's great to be able to kind of start off with you in the kitchen. I think we're going to go to hear from some of the chefs over the last 6 weeks, some of the content that they've provided. And then, but that's going to be after we, and then we're also going to just quickly do a quick shout out to a few people online. There's people here also from Darjeeling, from Nigeria. There's Andrea's on the train to Scotland. There's a lot of people commenting on the great weather in the UK at the moment. Well, it was beautiful and sunny here in Australia, just to let you know. But it's really great to have you guys all with us. Please keep introducing yourself. But Arthur, I think I'm going to hand over to you to kind of get started and deep dive into the content.
Yes. Okay. So welcome everybody. Thank you all for joining us. This is the London Action Hub from Somerset, hosted by Omved Gardens. My name is Arthur Potts Dawson. I'm a chef. I have been cooking for 35 years. And not all of those years I've been using stinging nettles, but today stinging nettles is going to be my resilient ingredient. I'm going to talk about the benefits of stinging nettles, how long they've been in the United Kingdom, and the importance of them both for fabric, medicine, food, and resilience discussion. But to put that into context, we need to listen to and see what the other chefs from around the world have presented as their resilient ingredients. So we're going to go from South Africa to India to Los Angeles, or San Francisco, actually, Ireland, and then get back into the kitchen here, because I'm cooking a risotto. I've got risotto in the pan here. I haven't got much time to show you, so I'm going to have to speed up. But this is a risotto, and I'm going to be putting a stinging nettle puree into this. It's going to be a green risotto. But what we need to do first is we're going to go live. Now, can we run the video that we're going to show you? It's about 12 minutes long, so these are the chefs from around the world. Some of you will recognize yourselves, but have a quick watch.
Jen, we can't hear.
Free and super very nutritious. Actually, it has like an amount of amino acids, like not much growth there, and make sure it is being affected is probably one of the most severely hit area by climate change, the desertification is approaching really fast. And there is so little that grows there, but there's this one ingredient, one crop that just thrives because it grows in poor soil and requires very little water. And that's fonio. I saw this crop as an opportunity, being a chef from Senegal, seeing that this grain was like gluten-free and super, super very nutritious. Actually, it has like an amounts of amino acids that are low in most grains. They call cysteine and methionine, and fonio has them in abundance. It has a very low glycemic index, so it's great for diabetics, people suffering from diabetics. It's very, very rich in fiber, 5 times more fiber than brown rice. So it's a grain that has lots going for it, but most importantly, it restores the topsoil because it has deep roots that stores the carbon dioxide. So it's like mitigates climate change. It slows the advance of desertification. So as a chef from Senegal based in New York, because I have a restaurant in New York City, Teranga. And so I was like, I see this as an opportunity. Chefs, as you know, after we have an audience, people trust us when it comes to food, And in particular in the United States, people were looking for ingredients like fonio. They're fascinated by ancient grains. Fonio is the oldest cultivated grain in Africa. It's been around for 5,000 years.
I want to give you guys a quick introduction on millets because I'm sure a lot of you might know about it, a lot of you might not know about it. So I think it'll be nice to just talk about it in terms of an ingredient, where is it found and why is it resilient? So I think firstly and most importantly, India is a country which has got so many different kinds of crops. And I mean, the biodiversity is absolutely ridiculous. Like in my kitchen itself, I might have like 130 spices, and every little bit of India and every different part of India, there's a different kind of climate, and each climate actually gives you different crops. So I think what's interesting to see is from the north, south, east, west, we've got, like I was saying, ingredients. Most importantly, they're mostly vegetarian ingredients. I'm not talking about animal produce. I'm just talking about vegetarian, vegan ingredients, which are very, very high in nutrition and protein. And a lot of it, because of globalization and because of fast food restaurants coming in, the internet, a lot of things which are very, very local and regional have stopped being consumed by the locals themselves because of this globalization that's been happening. So even my generation never grew up with millets, whereas millets is something which is very, very regional to India. It's something it's a heritage grain. In Hindi, which is our local dialect, it's called mota anaj, which means fat grain. If you translate it, absolutely, if you want to understand it. And a millet is actually a grain which is resilient because it only consumes about 1/10 the amount of water that rice or wheat would, especially rice, because rice requires a lot more water. But rice and wheat is what is grown as their cash crops, and millets are very, very regional. So different parts of India grow different kinds of.
The ingredient that I chose is Bambara groundnut, and purely because I've had firsthand interaction with the nut. My grandmother, who was a subsistence farmer and very rural, actually grew the Bambara nut and she sold them at the market. So she made a living planting, growing, harvesting, and then selling them. So for me, it's always been such an integral part of her farmer's life, because every time she grew the nut, every time she harvested, I always got a bag from her. I mean, I always got a bag from her from the time I was a kid. She'd bring like bags to my family, to my home, to my dad's house. And even when I'd left home and I was living, away from home, I always got a bag of Bambara nuts from her. So for me, they've got like that special, there's a special information around the nut for me. And also another thing that I've discovered about the nut is that, it's one of those ingredients that grows. It's indigenous to Africa and Asia, but it grows wild in West Africa and in Southern Africa. So it's one of those nuts that really links Africans. It links the West and the South. So I'm very, very excited to share my recipe with you. It's one of those ingredients that brings protein into our meals. So because the nut is packed with protein, is packed with nutrients, it's one that is almost like a full meal when you eat it. So if you're having maize meal, or if you're having sap, or if you're having sorghum, you would fortify it with the bambara just to add the protein to the meal. So eating bambara is almost like a whole meal. So for me, it's one of those really, really resilient ingredients, but that's also packed with nutrients. So I absolutely love it.
For me, so we are talking about seaweed. I'm very lucky where I live. I live on the east coast of Ireland, in Wexford, which is about an hour from Dublin or so in the countryside. So to the back of me, I've got like mountains and forests. In front of me, I've got a beach 5 minutes in front of my house. So seaweed to me is very accessible. There's plenty of it, and it's always great to go down there. So today at lunchtime, I just went down and I forgot that we're coming into autumn, so the tide had changed. The tide was actually in, so I couldn't get in where I normally go. So I just got onto some rocks and picked what I could get.
You didn't get in the water. Come on, Connor.
No, I didn't get in the water and see what we've got here.
Oh yeah, wow. I always look at that one at the top right. It always looks almost like seal skin, doesn't it? It's so tough.
This guy, yeah, it's like leathers. This is like a kelp.
Corn been around for 7,000 years. Mexico alone, they have 600 recipes of cooking corn. Corn is not only cultural, but it's a matter of survival for some people also. Why I say corn is very resilient, because through our history, corn always been there. When there's drought, when there's hurricane, when there's famine, how we say it, because you can store it very well, you can travel a long way without getting spoiled, and even certain recipes that we have can stay a long time without getting
result of years, decades of monoculture, abusing the soil instead of returning or learning from the tradition of agriculture that's being still done in my country and in many rural areas of Africa, which is the rotational way of agriculture. You allow the soil to breathe, you change the crops, you just do it in connection, in considering the soil, instead of like imposing a crop because you just want to sell tons of it out of seasons. So those are the reasons why I just decided to create YeoValley, which is the name of my company, and package crops like fonio, which were underutilized crops, and open markets for them. As you know, Arthur, when those crops are not utilized, they disappear.
First of all, like seaweed is a superfood. There's no question about that. The vitamins it contains, like 10 different types of vitamins. It's got like magnesium, calcium, it's protein. It's used in modern day today. It is used in a lot of medicines. It's used in a lot of skin care and so on, and probably less so much of food. But food, introducing seaweed as part of your diet is so good for you. And because it does have medicinal purposes, hence that's why it's used as a medicine.
The fastest growing crop, it grows in 2 months and it cooks in 5 minutes. So it's an amazing grain, and I've been working with farmers. I work directly with farmers because my mission is to really bring economic opportunities in those regions. They are the poorest regions of the world. If you go to Kedugu, where fonio is king, you'll notice one thing. There is no youth around. You don't see young people. There's only older people and women. Where are they? They're gone. They're migrating. They're probably trying to reach England right now. Some of them are in France. They think there are opportunities there that they don't have in their places. So making these type of crops, world-class crops, will bring opportunities, and these kids won't have to leave their countries and try to make it to Europe in the worst possible conditions. If you hear the statistics, they are trying to make it with dugout boats, fishermen dugout boats from living from Senegal trying to make it to Spain. The statistics are horrible. 2,000 plus people die in the water every single year. So this is something that, this grain and other crops can change. Not only is great for the environment, it's great for our health, but it's also great for the societies where these crops are from, because it can bring opportunities. It can give those kids who are living hope, and no need to go to Europe. They can make it there where they are.
So when I learned about millets, I asked my mother and my grandmother that, why is there this disconnect? Like, why did we stop cooking it and why did we stop eating it? And there were a couple of reasons. So one of them was that it was not easily available in the markets. Now the farmers had actually stopped growing millets because there was no demand for millets and there was only a very high demand for rice or wheat. And because of that, they stopped growing the millets, and because of that, there was a scarcity, and because of that, people stopped cooking with it, and we never got that kind of nutrition from it. In the last 3 years, I met a lady. She runs a brand where she, gets millets from little villages and she packages it and she sells it. She works with a lot of rural communities and NGOs. And she taught me about millets, and she told me that this is a grain that we've been using and consuming, but none of us know about it. Can you reintroduce it in your restaurants?
Because food is politics, man. But I get so passionate. Okay, I'm going to be very quick. Senegal was colonized by the French, right? And the French came, colonization was a business, right? The French wanted our farmers, our agriculture, to be growing peanuts at the time. Like, in Cote d'Ivoire, they wanted them to grow cocoa. In other parts of Africa, East Africa, it was tea. The French and the British, you guys know that. Okay, so this is how it went. so the French were in Senegal, but they were also in Vietnam. At the time, Vietnam was called Indochina, right? And Vietnamese had rice, and Vietnamese were processing their rice. And then after you process the rice, the degrees of rice, degrees, right? At the time, the Vietnamese would do it for their animal feeds, right? And the French said, let's bring it to Senegal. So the Senegalese farmers would focus on growing peanuts because we wanted peanut oil from those peanuts. And the Senegalese farmers won't think about growing fonio or millet or sorghum, those crops that we don't have any need for as French, we don't use that, and they will eat the broken rice. And they brought the broken rice, and the Senegalese embraced it because we were so brainwashed in thinking everything that comes from the West is best. The French are bringing this, is best. That's fine then, but 60 years after independence, we are still importing that broken rice. And we're looking down at products like fonio.
And you know that the Bambara is very resilient. So it grows very well in dry areas also. So even in droughts, you knew you could depend on the nut. It's the one thing that you know for sure will grow. And people would share it amongst each other because it's literally, because it's packed with protein, it becomes almost like a full meal.
I'm here to tell you, it is fonio. No, I'm sorry guys, but it's fonio. Look, check this out. The fonio, this is how you grow it. There's a nickname for fonio. They call it the lazy farmer's crop.
Lazy farmer.
Yeah. Lazy farmer's crop, because all they have to do is wait for the first rain. Check this out. When the first rain comes, the farmers take their fonio seeds and they barely till the soil. You don't even need to till the soil. And they throw the seeds like this on the ground. They throw it. They don't even, they don't till the soil, plant it in rows and stuff. And then what? They go and sit down and they sleep and they wait for 2 months. And the fonio will be guaranteed to grow even if there is no other rain. That's how drought resistant it is. And and there's another nickname for fonio because of that. They call it the hungry rice because they know they can rely on fonio when all the other crops fail to grow.
Okay. So the gauntlet has been thrown down, you see. Pierre's telling me fonio, Mokadi, you're telling me Bambara nuts, Anahita, you're telling me millet, Connor, you're telling me seaweed. So we are dealing with masses of positive ingredient inclusion into resilience. Okay, so I have got something that I want to show you, and because my resilient ingredient from the United Kingdom is stinging nettles. So there's an important piece of equipment for stinging nettles. That is the yellow glove, because I want to talk to you about stinging nettles because of their resilient nature, because of the way that they are able to purify both the soil and the body. And purification is one of the biggest issues around consuming produce, because we need to make sure that not only are you consuming something that's edible, that's good for you, but we want it to be healing. We want it good for the gut, we want it good for the body, but also good for the environment. So here we are. So this is by no means a competition, because I think that what Connor said about seaweed is probably some of the most important things that you could say about a resilient ingredient. And then, of course, Pierre talking about fonio in West Africa, and African farmers who, over millennia, mainly women in smallholder farms, are producing fonio for their family, and it stayed in their cultural and social circles, even though they had to grow other produce. So I'm standing here with stinging nettles, which grow virulently in the United Kingdom. In fact, they're really good. They grow pretty much in a lot of cold climate countries. They originated in Asia and the sort of southeast cold climates of Europe. They came to the United Kingdom with the Romans, but they have been used over 5,000 years, and they've seen it in Iron Age, Bronze Age, different types where stinging nettles have been used for making clothes. So I want to talk a little bit about stinging nettles. I am making a stinging nettle risotto, by the way, which is on and sort of pre-done because we've had to crush all this time. So I've only got 20 minutes here, so I've already used up 3 of those. So let's start at the bottom. The root. The root is absolutely the most amazing piece of plant. It is really, really good for you. And it's been used as a dye. So when you soak this in water, it goes yellow. So you can create an orangey yellow dye, which quite a lot of the Iron and Bronze Age peoples used. Across in Scandinavia, they use nettles a lot for colouring. But the root is also very, very good. If it's powdered, can be used in the prostate. It's very good for the blood. So the root is the beginning of the story. Look at these lovely fine roots. These have literally just come out of the ground. Now, I know if you're going to go foraging and you start pulling things up by the root, it's not good. So Vicky, I know you're out there, and the fabulous forager. I'm not dragging everything up by the root, but I'll tell you what, stinging nettles here in Somerset, you could pull them all up by the root by the millions and there would still be billions of stinging nettles. They are everywhere. And that's the thing about them. They are so virulent, which makes them resilient because they come into the soil, which is very, very high in nitrates and phosphates. And certainly it shows you whether or not the soil is good or not. And inside that sort of high levels of, it's usually when you dug the ground, it's usually when you turned the ground over, usually when the ground has been aerated, where these tiny little seeds, which are at the tip, you can see the seeds growing in here, the tip of they blow in the wind, and stinging nettles are everywhere. So the root is fantastic. Then, of course, you've got the stem, and the stem is hugely fibrous. And you see these fibers inside it. And this has been used for making clothes, bags, all kinds of different utilizations for this. I think they even used to make rope out of it. So if you think about a plant that's able to give you not just food and sustenance, but it's also usable for making clothes. I mean, it's not quite cotton, but you can get it quite fine. And, you pull it like wool and you spin it like wool. And then you have a yarn and a thread, which you then can make clothes from, or bags, or straps, or if you want to make a bowstring handle. So we are talking about a hugely usable product. And then, of course, you come to the leaves. The leaves are, it tastes a little bit like spinach and cucumber. If you mix the two together, spinachy, cucumbery, you need to cook them a tiny little bit. And what I usually do is you pick them right at the tip here. So I'll just take the top 3. 1, 2, 3, you can see from the top there, and I'll give them a quick wash and a quick blanch. And you can blanch them. You kind of need to eat them cooked, although in 1986, in Dorset, which is a county in the United Kingdom, 2 farmers started a competition because both of the farmers said they had more stinging nettles than each other on their property. And they said, well, let's see who can win this argument by see who can eat the most amount of raw nettles possible. Now, every year, in Dorset, there are now thousands of participants. There is a nettle eating competition. Now, I'm tempted, but I'm not going to do it. I know some of you are saying, eat it, eat it. No way. These are virulent Somerset stinging nettles. So what I've done is I've taken these, and you like this bunch. Mokadi, I wish I could send you a bunch of stinging nettles, but you probably don't want them in South Africa. They'll just probably just take over. You've probably got them there anyway. But so.
Of course they would.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So what I'm going to do now is I've got a second phone running. Now, Pierre over in San Francisco showed me how to do this last week, where he's got 2 or 3 different phones running to be able to bring you live. This camera angle is going to remain static. I'm going to go over to my risotto and start cooking it. But I do want to make sure that you understand that the leaves of the stinging nettle plant are unbelievably good for you. They've got manganese and phosphate. They've got unbelievable amounts of minerals, unbelievable amounts of vitamins, extremely high in iron, beta carotenoids. They have just got, that you can make soups, you can make risottos, which I'm going to show you. You can make pies. I mean, anything that you really use spinach for, you can use stinging nettles. And you have to understand that you would have turned to this in times of need, but not just need. These are really, really good for you. They will, if stinging nettle fails, if spinach fails, stinging nettles will survive. Stinging nettles, I mean, I've seen them live through pretty much anything, and they're always growing. I mean, spring and autumn are when they're at their best. Try not to eat the leaves when they're too old. I've got spiders crawling all over me from these fresh stinging nettles. I've got snails, and these are very, very good for the environment, for pollinators when they flower. Butterflies, bees, wasps all come and use their flowers for both nectar, but also for pollination. So they are a vital part of Northern European vitamin and mineral access. So stinging nettles are here to stay. I think that they should be used more. I think that if you could eat more stinging nettles, you'd appreciate them. They're very, very good for your blood, very good for your liver. They're a diuretic, so they are very healing. They will not only they'll pull the toxins out of your body, but because they are diuretic, they will flush those toxins away. So they're very, very healing. Great medicine. But also the stinging nettle seeds are really, really good for the body, but very, very strong. So we don't want to use too many of them. Perhaps Vicky can tell us a little bit about it later on. We've been harvesting the stinging nettles at Omved Gardens, drying the seeds, and then we put them through our protein, vegetable protein balls with dates and different sweeteners. I present the stinging nettle as a resilient ingredient. It's certainly not very high in carbohydrates, but it's full of vitamins and minerals, extremely good for your body, hugely resilient in the environment. It shows you just how to cleanse your soil. So if you see stinging nettles growing in your garden, any gardener sees stinging nettles growing, they know the soil there is good. So pull up your stingers and put in some veggies. And the stinging nettle will always be alongside you. Right, so I want to show you. So this is what we're going to do. Oh, right, it's not working. Sorry, we were going to go live to a second camera, but we're not going to do that now. So I'm just going to keep talking to you about stinging nettles. So look, there's the stinging nettles. I have blanched them and pureed them. And in that pureeing process, I've gone and created a very, very, very green puree. Look how green this is. Now, it's so green that unfortunately, we were talking a little bit about using these ingredients for different things. The British Army during the Second World War, there's a reason why the British Army wears green, is because it's dyed by stinging nettles, their uniform. So if you think of the green uniform, they had to find the most abundant ingredient that they could use to color their uniforms, and here you go. So we have stinging nettle green. Was part of the army's color, but it's so green, super full of chlorophyll, so very, very good for the body. So I think this needs to be included in people's diets more and more. So stinging nettles, if you can. A little story, when I was working at the River Cafe, we used to buy stinging nettles, but you wouldn't believe it, we used to buy organic stinging nettles from Italy, big boxes, and we were in London, and you can imagine that Italian farmer picking stinging nettles in Italy, going, I can't believe the British are paying £50 a box for my stinging nettles, and they were sending them over. So that's just the ridiculousness of the cuisine sometimes. Now, what I wanted to do is I was going to have Connor on today, but he's had to go into a big meeting. So I've got Mokadi and Anahita both live with me. So hi, chefs, how are you both?
Hi. Hi, Arthur.
I don't know if you can.
Mokadi, you're muted. I cannot hear you.
Am I muted?
Oh no, I got you now. I was muted.
I can hear Mokadi.
Yes.
Okay, it's me.
I can hear you.
I
can hear everyone. Okay.
I was really waiting for. I wanted to show you the sunset. I'm actually in the hills.
Oh wow!
So I just thought.
Oh, it's beautiful. Oh my word.
And all this. So we went in the morning, and there are so many stinging nettles in the foothills of the Himalayas, and that's what I was typing. And it's grown like it's wild. It's absolutely wild. So even if you brush against it, you get like a rash. And in Hindi, we call it bichu booty, which is like, you know, that it gives you a rash basically, but it's used in Uttarakhand in the cuisine or in the local regional cuisine here. It's used a lot. So lots of dishes with potatoes and, you know, different kinds of like a spinach puree, like how Arthur made it. We make it in India as well, in the northern part of India.
Okay. Well then, so.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
As an ingredient, I think it's a very important one because it grows wild and can be grown as a crop. But it's very good for you. Just a quick
like amaranth.
Catherine Wells, can the puree be kept? It must be eaten fresh. You can keep it. I've kept it in the fridge successfully for 3 or 4 days. You could probably freeze the puree as well if you want to use a chunk of it and put it into your beans. But I mean, freezing any fresh produce, you know, is probably going to break some of the cellular structure down and might not be as good for you. But I think there's so much captured in this puree that you can probably freeze it too. But keep it in your fridge with a lid on, as little oxygen as there as possible. If you want to cover the puree with a little bit of oil, that'll stop any air getting to it, and maybe it'll last 5 days. Right. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you through how to make a risotto. Because now let's have a look. If we can just bring this computer over. So, welcome to my kitchen, by the way. This is the Somerset kitchen. And this is an arbor. So this is a sort of hot plate which runs. And we've got 2 pieces to it. One is hot, one is medium. I want to move it over to the hot. Now what I'm doing is, because we're running out of time, I need to make sure that this was cooked ahead of time. So we're basically 3/4 of the way through this risotto being cooked. This is onion and celery and garlic in the base of this pan, cooked down with a little bit of butter. Now, excuse me, but this is not an advertisement, but I am telling you, Tim, that I use this butter in my risotto. This is YeoValley, just up here in Somerset. And so this butter is nice and rich, a little bit of salt in it, but very Somerset. So here we are. The risotto is cooking out with the celery and yarn.
Nice.
As the rice is cooking, I put my stock in and I stir it through, making sure we keep it hot. And what I need to make sure is that you've probably, as chefs all over the world, heard about al dente. Well, we're looking for an al dente product, but if I just squash this rice, you can just see that it's still a little bit floury. You can see these, I don't know if you can catch this, but there's a tiny little bit of in that risotto. Now, that, if I taste it, it's got a tiny little bit of bite to it, which in Italian is called al dente, with a tooth, on the tooth.
Al dente.
Is more or less cooked out at its base. That is the base of the risotto. So, what I want to do is I'm going to put fabulous butter. And this is, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, not a vegan recipe, but it is a vegetarian recipe. And I'm going to add to this
more butter.
Cooked. This is the finishing touches to a risotto. So, first of all, I keep banging my head on this. Look at this cast iron skillet. Look at that. Hey, chefs out there. Nice skillet. There you go. Chef, very chefy. Right, here we are. This is a risotto. I'm stirring it, but I'm stirring the rice through it. And I want to make sure that there's this sort of glisten. I want it to begin to shine. But I can't make this process too wet because I'm going to add the green stinging nettle.
Add the stinging nettle.
Yeah, which is quite wet. Basically, you know, lots of water. But now the trick is you need to let this just relax a little bit. What I wanted to show you is This is an unpasteurized cheddar cheese from 2 doors down. This is a Somerset cheddar. There's a reason why it's called cheddar cheese, because cheddar is 3 miles in this direction. So we're very, very close to cheddar. And this is a cheddar cheese, and it's quite strong. But because these stinger nettles have just been pulled out of the ground 2 miles from cheddar, I've got this unpasteurized cheddar cheese. And I want to talk about, look at the relationship between, you know, the green pastures of Somerset, which are very, very green. And that is part of the dairy is so good.
Get the best cheese.
Part of the world. So I just wanted to show that there's resilience isn't just about one ingredient. It's about communities of people working together to produce product and balance each other out. So here I've got cheddar cheese. I've also got, I mean, for example, look at this. I've got a very flash thing to talk to you about. Eggs from just down the road. So you can imagine a community.
Oh, wow.
Take a tiny little bantam.
Yeah.
Delicious. Now, if you were to take, and I've used risotto rice today because I'm using it in a very chefy way, but I could use a spelt or a barley to make a risotto like this. But I wanted to show you the contrast between the white rice and then the green going in. So we can do a barley risotto another day. But we've got local cheese, local nettles, local eggs. We're talking about ingredients that really make a community resilient. Right, racing through this. Now, we're going to put all of this stinger nettle.
The green nettles.
Look at this.
My color is amazing.
That's beautiful. Wow. Wow.
Now, this is going to make it, I mean, what's really interesting about stinger nettles is they're quite oily. They carry an oil inside them. And they're going to make this really silky. So now, if you can catch this, watch this stir. I just stir, stir, stir. It's gone from white to almost dark green. Look at this. See the white
green. Oh, wow, that is beautiful.
The country colour. This is a green risotto. Look at this colour, just comes to life. Now, I need to make sure I put a little bit more grated cheese in this and check the seasoning, but we are going to have to move on. We've got so much today, but what I wanted to do was, Mokadi, Anahita, Connor, Pierre, Natasha in New York, I wanted to present to you as a resilient ingredient in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
I know we talked about Africa, we talked about South America, we talked about India, but you know we have to look at our localized stories so that globally we understand that there is a resilience coming from the ingredients that we're Mokadi, I was so intrigued by your, and we're going to switch to some questioning now, but I was so intrigued by not only the Bambara nut being something that you grew culturally, but socially. It's allowed people in South Africa, especially women farmers, to actually remain resilient, remain connected to the community. And you said, your grandmother used to get Bambara nuts, your mother used to get it, you used to get bags of nuts and just walk around with them, right? So can you tell us a little bit in the Bambara nut and how it was important socially?
Well, it's crazy because, after I did that thing with you, I went and researched more about the nut. And it turns out that when girls got married, they got given Bambara nuts by their family because it's one of those, it's almost like an heirloom seed where you take it to your new family so you can grow these nuts because they are such an important part of culture. It's like if you've got the nuts, you'll never go hungry. So it's almost, the nut itself represents so much more than just food. It's basically interlinked and interwoven into cultures. And I found that very amazing because I got the information from my grandmother. So it's almost like indigenous knowledge systems flowing through the nut from one generation to the other, So for me, it's one of those it's resilient, and its resilience is seen by how many people are still connected to the nut even till today. Even now, the nut is sold mostly in informal markets by women who grow these nuts, and they boil them fresh and they sell them fresh in markets, and they still make money and they still make a living from these nuts. So they're really, really interlinked into our cultures. And I find that so amazing. And it's like really needs to come back as those ingredients that everyone needs to know about. Because right now,
coming back now to you, Mukadi, because once we pick up the resilience story, we can all start talking about it differently in our restaurants and in our family.
Exactly.
So I just want to to the risotto, and then we'll go to Anahita. So the risotto is just finishing. The rice is al dente. My family are very lucky; they're all getting risotto for lunch. I'm finishing this off with some cheese, and I'm just making sure the seasoning is right. Now look at this classic pepper mill. We grind it at the top, and then you get the little bottle. This is pepper going in. So I'm finishing with fresh pepper. I've put a little bit of salt in, but I need you to come. If you can't really see this, but we're getting this really gentle shine. And you can see the stinging nettles really come out and begin to hit this silkiness to this risotto. And you can see how this is
that
really
looks
soft.
That looks so good.
So as we're going to plate it, go back to our systems. Here we are. Here's my plate. Right, Anahita, while I'm going to plate this, can I ask you almost a similar question to Mukadi? What and how was millet really integrated socially, certainly from the farmers, and how has it been kept culturally connected to the people in your area?
Okay, so about, I mean, I've seen everyone's sessions and everyone's brought this amazing ingredient from their countries, from their cultures. I think what I thought and what I went back and researched after our session was, why are people so hesitant, to try these ingredients and go back to these ingredients and, champion in the, these ingredients. You're talking about stinging nettles. I have them all around me right now in the hills. But I don't see it being used the way it should be used with the kind of vitamins and the minerals it has. There are local millets that are grown here, but I still don't see them being championed as much as other cuisines would be. So I had this question. I was like, why are people hesitant, and why are people not going back to using these ingredients enough so that farmers kind of grow them, and it needs to thrive. That's what you said, that stinging nettles are here and they're here to stay and they're here to thrive. So I think it's also about creating a hype with that ingredient. Like, the more we talk about it, the more we research it at Chef, the more we create innovative dishes with it, we get people to try it, like this stinging nettle risotto. I mean, I want to try it.
Wait 1 second. Now,
that looks amazing. Yeah, me too.
You pat the bottom, the stinging nettle should flatten. Can you see what's happening here? I'm flattening the stinging nettle risotto. It has to be able to flatten, then you know it's a good risotto, okay? So now it's sticking on the plate. Whoa, I don't want it to fall off. I put a little bit of cheese on it, and this is a hugely delicious, but also super, super good for you. I mean, this green chlorophyll-filled, vitamin and mineral packed risotto is fabulous for you and for the family. But a little bit of fresh cheese on top, through that. But it's basically the silkiness of the stinging nettles with some rice, and it could be spelt or oats. But I know there are a few people who are going to eat this, and we're going to move on. But I just want to make sure that we're running to time, because Anahita and Mukadi, we need to really, as we go through the panelists today and talk about resilience, I wanted to make sure the chefs were really focused on understanding resilience and why it's important in stressed times to keep using these ingredients. So, Anahita, Mukadi, do you want to talk a little bit about understanding stress, not only from an ingredient perspective, but from people? Because I know, Mukadi, you were doing brilliantly in telling me the other day about how your family and the community around you had gotten and are stressed with the environment that's on us at the moment, and how resilient the human condition is in these times.
Yeah. Look, it's the only thing that is keeping us together is, the fact that we as a community, even just family, have kind of like decided that we're going to, stick together and fight through these terrible times. But more than anything, I mean, for me, the ingredients that are grown here and in South Africa, especially because that's where I am, which means local ingredients, even things that are naturalized and are growing wild, that for us is that for me is the food that we need to go back to, because it's free and it's available and it grows wild, which means that it's, you know, it grows with nature, it works with Mother Nature. So for me, we as humans need to go back to those to those resilient ingredients, because those are the ones that are really going to see, they're going to be around even when we're gone. So, you know, the trick is, you know, if they grow wild, is also to create an environment where they, you know, they're not abused by big corporates who now take over these ingredients and again bring back that bad element around, you know, chemicals, growing them for profit, because, you know, finding that balance is what we need. We need to find that balance between, you know, growing stuff that's good for the earth, even the resilient stuff, but making it accessible for everybody. So making it accessible for everybody doesn't necessarily mean that we need to go, you know, the old route of monoculture, and now you're growing, you know, bags and bags and you know, acres and acres of bambara nuts, and now you've killed the other vegetation. Because part of resilience of these ingredients is biodiversity. So the earth grows, the earth gets heals, and it gets enriched by biodiversity. So it's important to keep these resilient ingredients in circulation.
Anahita, how do we feel as chefs around resilience, and both people being resilient in their business and in their personal lives, but also with resilient ingredients? I mean, we are moving in a time when we need to be more resilient, right?
So I think as chefs, we've got this amazing opportunity right now to create dishes in our own capacity, in our restaurants, in our communities. It could be at home, it could be on social media, whatever it might be. We have to, as a community, start using ingredients that are locally available. I think we've been championing those ingredients and talking about those ingredients and creating recipes, because I just feel that till the time you don't get people interested in that ingredient, you don't make them taste it, like the risotto you've just made. Yeah. It just makes me want to try it because it looks so good. It's such a creative way of using stinging nettles. I think that's the same thing that we have to do with each of our, you know, ingredients that we have, which are locally available. And that's what I mean, I do with millets, and, you know, we did the millet salad with whatever we had in the fridge. It's just about, you know, having a basic knowledge of how to cook it. So you need to know, it needs to have like a 1:2 water ratio, because I think generally the public is just scared. Secondly, maybe they don't have access to such ingredients. I think that could be one of the issues, where they are unable to, you know, get the ingredient and try the ingredient, even though they want to be sustainable and they want to be resilient. So we just have to make time and space efforts to use more resilient ingredients.
Yeah.
And what's been really interesting is that, you know, the Chefs Manifesto puts out a global call. Hey, chefs, you want to talk about ingredients? You want to talk about resilience? And we had some amazing chefs, you know, respond. And Mokadi and you being some of them, and the most amazing contributors to the Chefs Manifesto, and have been for years. It's been interesting to be invited to do this, right? Because you both said, once I presented my resilient ingredient, I went out and even researched it even more. So there's been kind of sense of, hang on a minute, we really need to think this through. It's been good, right?
Yes.
Yes.
No, definitely. I mean,
go for it. I'll go after.
No, I'm saying definitely. I mean, for me, it's almost like researching about the bambara nut. It just opened another door for me. And as a chef, it's just been so amazing. And also learning about where the area that it grows in you know, in places where there's sorghum, where sorghum grows, and millet. So within the bambara nut, you'll find sorghum or millet next to it. For some strange reason, it's almost like it pairs up with those two grains, which are also indigenous to Africa. So for me, it's almost like the ingredient itself is teaching me so much about food and resilience, and the fact that also the bambara nut adds phosphorus and stuff, minerals into the soil that it grows in. For me, I mean, it's literally the ingredient opened the door for me, and I've just learned so much. You know, it's like a real good teacher. So, and we need that as chefs, we need that curiosity, so we can also champion these ingredients, and we can use them properly. As Anahita said, if we know what they're about, and we can get the basis of what the ingredient is about, then you're able to be creative and make it accessible and loved by other people.
Yep. I mean, I'm just going to add to that because I don't want to take any more time, but I just feel all of us have that power, and a lot of young chefs, a lot of people who are watching, and a lot of people on social media who keep, reading about these things. We just have to get them interested into just trying it once or twice. And I think these sessions with Omved Gardens and Arthur and the Chefs Manifesto has been an absolute, like a door which opened with all the chat questions that came in. And I think Arthur would know that the people who joined in and asked so many questions actually made us go back and research a bit more and talk about it a little bit more. So great learning for everyone, and for the chefs who spoke about resilient ingredients.
Well, what's really exciting, Mokadi and Anahita, is that we are going to be joined by so many other people today to talk about the just resilience, whether it's organic, whether it's soil, regenerative agriculture. And so as chefs, and it'd be great to know how many chefs are signed in at the moment. I'm assuming probably 20 or 30 chefs from all over the world connected, plus guests, welcoming you all. We're going to be moving away from this panel, talking about from a chef's perspective of resilience, and move towards understanding how chefs can really pull together stories from farmers, because Mokadi, Anahita, I'd like to give you the last word. It's important that we hear as much as we can from you. So if you're going to go out and get the bambara nut from a farmer, or from a lady farmer, a woman who's working her bambara nuts, or the millet, the very particular types of millets that you get in different parts of India, how is that engagement important for chefs and that farming level?
Well, us as chefs, we need to understand how the farming process works, because it's very key to us being able to champion these ingredients. If you don't understand how it's grown and what effect it has on the earth, then you are only learning half the story. Because food the whole system is important. So where the ingredient grows and how it grows is just as important as how you then champion it, or even how you serve it. So for me, whatever I do is always to champion the ingredient, but also the farmers behind the ingredient, because they are the ones who are the custodians of these ingredients. We just make the ingredients shine, but the farmers are the custodians. They bring everything, they take care of it, they make sure there's biodiversity in the ground. So they're key to actually bringing nutrient dense food to the people more than we are. I mean, we already, by the time we get the ingredient, it's done. The farmer has done their job. So they are very key to the whole cycle.
So I'm again just going to add to Mokadi, saying that as chefs, we have to take that step out of getting out of our kitchens and actually talking to our farmers. For too long, we've just been disconnected with our farmers. And I think now we've actually started talking to them, getting to know local farmers, even in urban areas, talking to local farmers, and, just getting to know what they grow and how they grow it. And spending one day at a farm in the heat will tell you and teach you how hard it is, and how much work, and how they, take care of the plants like babies. And I mean, in the kitchen, it is hot, and it is hard for us to work as chefs. But I think what the farmers bring to us, we just have to, show that to the world, that this is what they've created, and we are going to, show you a dish out of that ingredient. And I mean, it's just a superpower. So I think it's amazing what they do and what we can do with great produce.
Okay, Mokadi and Anahita, as always, my two most favorite chefs in the whole world. I thank you both so much for joining in this panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you.
Such a pleasure. I'm still not quite.
I wish we could taste that risotto.
I wish I could taste. It looks amazing. Oh my word.
Well, my family are eating now, so they'll come and tell us in a minute what they think. Now, so thank you both so much. We're just about to move on to Lee Holstock, who's representing the Soil Association. But as always, from the Resilient Sessions, I think it's important that you both have the last word I think Anahita maybe has signed off. And Makadi, final point before we leave you, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully you'll stay on board, but it's been great to have you. But final say before you say goodbye.
Well, for me, I'd love to just say thank you so much for having me here. I mean, I've learned so much from you, just from the Chefs Manifesto and engaging with all the other chefs. It's just been incredible. And these sessions have been incredible. I've learned so much. And I always thought I knew everything, but I keep learning. And I'm so, so grateful for all the other chefs that did, that did the resilient ingredients. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Makadi. Anahita?
Okay, I'm still here. I thought that you guys stopped the session, but I'm still here.
Yeah.
I just want to say that every time we do something with the Chefs Manifesto, I always feel like it's just a new door that opens for chefs, where we get to learn something. It could be, on at the Eat Forum, or it could be just online as a session, or it could be, a UN program. It could be just the smallest of conversations that I might have with Arthur or any of the chefs on the team. I just feel like there's so much for us to learn outside the kitchen, which we can implement in the kitchen, and it makes us think differently, which with everyday cooking doesn't happen. So I think it's important to pause, learn, reflect, and most importantly, showcase your ingredients, your local ingredients, to the world.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. So we move on. We move on from our panel of resilient ingredients from chefs from all over the world, and my resilient ingredient being stinging nettles. And we move on to speak to Lee Holtstock. Lee, hi. I wonder if you could unmute and almost be prepared for what's to come in the next 15 minutes. Are you there, Lee?
Yeah, I am. Good afternoon, Arthur, and thanks very much for asking me to be with you all today.
Thank you, Lee. Lee, if perhaps you could quickly introduce yourself, but then we're going to run through, maybe you could just introduce yourself, but then we just had two chefs, and chefs from all over the world represent resilient and indigenous ingredients. Maybe you'd like to give us a quick thought on that before we jump into a couple of questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think, well, just first of all, to introduce myself, I'm the Senior Business Development Manager for Soil Association Certification in the UK. So we're the biggest organic certifier in the UK. If you go out shopping, you'll see our mark on well over 75% of the products on the shelf. So yeah, and Arthur, just reflecting on what I've heard, I'm always really fascinated with the fact that we've moved the conversation on in recent years from just talking about the actual products we buy and the system to which they've been produced, to actually thinking harder about the issue of kind of what we should be eating and whether it's appropriate to eat certain products, and actually bringing that mix in, and fundamentally the fact that diet is a really, really important part of that kind of journey towards making things better.
Right. Well, no, I agree with you 100%, Lee. And I think that the Soil Association has been a great stalwart for all of that discussion. But let's just pull up the questions I want to be talking to you about today, because we've already kind of got some stuff to talk about. So I don't surprise you with any questions that you weren't going to be asked, Lee. Here's a question that I'd like to put to you. Maybe we'll get some come from the questions. So please do ask Lee anything that you'd like. But question to you: what, from an organics production standpoint, does regenerative agriculture mean? Because we're going to start talking about regenerative agriculture now, and does that mean resilience? And why in the UK we're not needing to pick that style of farming yet? Can you talk us a little bit through that?
Yeah, of course, Arthur. Well, I think first of all, it's worth pointing out that we do have a slightly different position in the UK and the EU. We have the luxury of an organic standard, or an organic regulation, which arguably is a little bit more advanced, a bit more prescriptive, and I know that can create challenges in itself. But that puts us into a slightly different space from the US. And I think the emergence of regenerative organic agriculture in the States is really the result of a kind of a schism that's occurred there in response from long-term dedicated organic producers who frankly see the federal standards for organic being increasingly diluted. So they don't really, they don't really see that what's being done to a sort of federal standard is really truly putting back. And I think the challenge that you get in an organic market is if there is far too much talk to consumers about what they can avoid by being organic. They can avoid pesticides. There isn't a conversation about actually what organic gives back, what it actually puts back. And I think sadly that direction of travel means that the regulation is dictated sometimes by the conversation to consumers. And so, yeah, we're looking at arguably, I think in the EU, we would say a fairly weak federal standard in some respects in the US, and hence this emergence of a group of producers, farmers, food businesses who want to actually go, do organic plus. In Europe, we would suggest that we're already doing that incredibly well. Organic is has always been a regenerative style of farming. Perhaps we need to talk a bit more about those give backs, the things that we put back, and that's particularly relevant at the moment as we leave the common agricultural policy behind and we start thinking about how we reward farmers in the UK for the public good that they do and the ecosystem services. So I would argue, yeah, we already organic really includes regenerative approaches. It is already in there. We're already codified and regulated, so the consumer and anybody else buying the product from those farmers can be sure that they're subscribing to that system of benefits. But equally, I would finally say that the wider picture needs to be explored at the moment. Whether you want to be organic or not, I think we need to have a bigger, wider conversation with more farmers about agroecological approaches generally. So you might be a farmer who doesn't want to be organic, but fundamentally, if you want to embrace some of those principles of working with nature and not relying on synthetic chemistry, then brilliant, get on board. And I think you'll probably see more of a conversation about where those kind of people can be regenerative too. But ultimately, the leading edge, the gold standard is, I would argue, for regenerative is organic. So I think we want to really, we would really like to kind of own that a bit more and talk about it a bit more in organic.
How, Lee, then, are we going to become more resilient? I mean, one of the questions that we as chefs have been asking, what are resilient ingredients? How can we be resilient as businesses? And because resilience is almost immediate rather than sustainability being the sort of longer term goal. If we are to look at resilience and the immediate requirements of the coming harvests, over the next few years, how important is production and consumption of UK grown produce in the UK to withstand both this, virus pandemic plus Brexit hitting us? We've got all these types of, stresses on our food environment. Can you stretch that narrative a little bit about resilience and the need to grow and consume food in your location?
Yeah, I think I've always really believed that an agroecological or organic approach combined with local is your kind of optimum approach. But I guess from Soil Association's perspective, first of all, we are dealing with national, international markets. We're never going to grow our own coffee in the UK. We're never going to grow a lot of products that we we consume and wouldn't want to live without. And international trade is a reality. So I think the first thing to acknowledge is that if you are going to buy products that have been grown a long way away, then at least think about the resilience of the approach that's being applied. Now, organic agricultural methods do bring that level of resilience, the diversity that's encouraged on the farm, on the holding, the having soils that have been looked after, have had the organic matter levels built up, have been developed and really sort of nurtured, gives you an intrinsic level of resilience in that farming system. It's far harder for pests and disease to get a foothold in a very diverse farming system. The diversity of crops means that the farmer doesn't have reliance on solely one thing. And this is even relates to things like water usage. I've personally been out to witness in the UK where we've had organic arable fields close to harvest in a drought growing next to non-organic crops, and because the plants are rooting deeper, they're going down deeper to find the nutrients because they're not being scattered from a bag on the surface, then these crops are much more drought resilient. So what we see in that farming method, wherever you're buying your food from, is that you've got a more diverse, more resilient system of farming, which is in a much better place to really, face the shocks that are inevitably coming as climate change starts to put pressure on our global food systems. But again, a local level, that's even better. I'm a big fan of local food from the perspective that if it's organic, it can build in all that systemic resilience. But equally, the consumer, the person eating it, can have a closer, stronger relationship with the person who's actually growing their food and build more of an empathy for what they're trying to achieve. And I'd finally say that it never fails to surprise me when I talk to somebody who is providing, produce for consumers en masse in the UK, maybe organic. Do they feel threatened by the fact that people are growing their own? No, they never do. They're really keen to support and encourage people growing their own food, as they have in this pandemic in increasing numbers, because it does generate that kind of empathy and understanding of what the organic grower is trying to do. I've done it this year. It's not easy. I've had my successes and failures, and it's really given me a personal appreciation of how damn difficult it is to do sometimes, to grow your own and do it the right way.
Lee, I've got some questions coming in. I think it's important that we try and get some people being able to question our panelists. So hopefully there's nothing too difficult here to answer. 2 questions, please. One from Katie Wheaton and another one from Karen Pegarani. For Katie's saying that regenerative agriculture goes beyond organic growing. Organic farms can still have soil dunes, so it would be good if the Soil Association started to address soil health. I thought that was part of your policy, but anyway. And another question there, beyond organic food, what is the Soil Association doing for biodiversity of our ecology and the conversation about rewilding? So soil dunes, soil health, ecology and rewilding. Any points back on that?
Sure. Well, I can't comment specifically on soil dunes. That's not my area of expertise. But what I would say is that it is incredibly important and central to the organic standards that we do build soil health, and many of the techniques and indeed the rules and the standards are very much focused on doing that. With the Soil Association, we would be seriously remiss in our main mission if we weren't encouraging farmers to do that. Equally, we understand that there's a huge variation in systems. We've got farmers who are new to this. They have to come at it from essentially a previously chemical farming and go through that conversion journey. So we do have to set rules that are workable for a good number of producers that want to. I mean, we could make those tougher and tougher and tougher. I mean, it is a balance. We never set standards that would compromise our basic principles, but it is also about being realistic. Currently, less than 5% of agricultural land area in the UK is actually organic. We've got a long way to go, and if we set that bar too high, I think that could keep us, very niche for a long time, and that wouldn't help us to address the big challenges that we need to address. So that is, I'd say, first in terms of actually biodiversity. Then we're seeing some really great examples of where farms are significantly boosting their biodiversity through farming practice. So we have recently the example of Wimpole Hall Estate, Home Farm, which is a National Trust estate. They've looked at the results of farming organically under Soil Association rules for the last 18 years, and they have seen, 16 years, a 38% increase in biodiversity on that farm in the space of 18 years. So we're starting to see the evidence and the proof that farming organically really boosts biodiversity. In terms of rewilding, then I think there's always an opportunity to look at the best use of our land. That's part of that bigger journey agroecologically, to say, well, look, there will always be areas of land that, frankly, it isn't worth them being productive. There's a huge amount of effort going in to drain fields to basically keep them in production for the sake of production. Some cases they may be better rewild, but there are some really interesting examples of farms that have found that they can strike that balance between rewilding and actually a very, very low intensity production of things like livestock. So we're really excited by these, and I think, of course, we want them to maintain those organic principles where they are farming, even if it's a sort of imbalance with a semi-rewilded holding.
Interesting question coming in here, and we'll need to kind of finish off, but I do quite like this one from Dominicas Salvatis, saying that beginning of 2021, National Food Strategy in the UK will present it as an advisory policy for the government on setting sustainable food standards in the UK. It has good recommendations on how to create access of health and nutritious food to those who cannot afford it. However, recommendations does not define what sustainable food standards could be. So can we finish on what a sustainable or maybe even resilient food standard would be for the future. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and again, going back to this point that I think, we believe that the organic standard, rather predictably, I'm going to say this is an incredibly well-tested, tried, codified approach, which has got international recognition. So we're always going to be keen to sort of, keep pushing that forward, because we think it has attempted to encompass and think about as many of the sustainability issues as possible. But equally, we at least need to be thinking about a broadly agroecological approaches if we want to be sustainable. And as I think I said at the beginning, we aren't going to be able to build that resilience, build a country or even a wider federal community such as Europe, which is addressing the future challenges of climate change and loss of biodiversity, unless we have an integrated approach which policymakers understand that it's not just about the way that you farm and shunning chemicals, but it's also about changing diets and adapting the way that we do things. So Soil Association, for example, we don't just do organic, we're also the lead on a project called Food for Life. And I know, Arthur, we've talked about that a lot in the past, and you've been very supportive, which is really addressing some of those fundamental issues about not just real food in public sector, in the UK stores, hospitals, making sure that it's mostly freshly prepared, but also that, we're rewarding people for thinking about things like meat-free days in public sector food service. So we can start to gradually change those diets, because we're not going to do this simply by changing agricultural practice. It's about land use, it's about what we eat, and it's also about getting policymakers to really recognise that. It's fundamentally about joining the dots between climate, nature and health in all aspects, whether that's the way you farm to the way you eat and what you eat.
Well, climate, nature, health, I mean, we are moving forward rapidly into a changing world, and all of those issues are absolutely paramount. Lee, alarm bells are ringing. I'm being told time. Thank you so much for your time, Lee. That's been really, really helpful, and it's helped us to set up the next panel discussion. So Lee, thank you very much for answering questions from the general public. Katie Wheaton says, thank you, Lee, for your answer to her question. Paul, we've been waffling on for ages now. Hopefully the content has allowed you to bring in these scientists from CGIAR. Perhaps you could introduce them and move on from here. But thank you, Lee, Mokadi, Anahita, and Paul. I'm going to hand back to you if you're there. Are you around?
Yeah, I'm here, Arthur. Okay. So thanks so much. This is great. Well, thank you, Arthur, and thank you, Lee and Makadi and Anayata. It's really amazing to kind of just listen and hear about the different ingredients, but also to hear from different parts of the world. And now we're gonna shift. We've got three more guests that are coming to us from different parts of the world as well. And so I'm going to ask each of them. They're from the CGIAR. Which is a network of organizations working on research. And as they each introduce themselves, they'll probably give you an insight into some of the amazing work that the CGIAR is doing in different centers around the world. So what I'm going to ask you to do is just to introduce yourself, to also tell us a little bit about what you're working on, just because you've each got really interesting areas that you're working on. And then we're going to go into a few questions. So we've got about 25 minutes. So I'm super excited. So who wants to go first?
Woman first, I guess.
Who wants to go? Go, please. Yes, perfect. Go for it.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone from Penang, Malaysia. My name is Shukintila, and I work as the research program leader for value chains and nutrition at WorldFish. And WorldFish, as Paul said, is one of the CGIAR research centers. I work on development and promoting aquatic food systems for healthy diets and healthy planet.
Wow.
The work we do stretches across the globe. We do quite a lot of work in African countries, in Asia, and also the Pacific. And as we all know, aquatic foods, fish and other aquatic foods, are extremely nutritious foods. And they form the diets, they are an integral part of the diets of many people. And we also know that some of the production systems for aquatic foods are not as impactful as other types of production of foods on the environment.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely, this is really, really critical work, and the ocean is such a all aquatic foods is such a key part to climate resilience and the work around nutrition as well. And we'll hear a little bit more about that in a minute. Claudia.
Sure. Yeah. Hello to everyone. I've been listening. It has been very interesting. So I feel like cooking nettles now. So I work with the International Food Policy Research Institute and on a research program that focuses on water, land, and ecosystems. So very broad. So largely at the production end of the food system. So the other side of cooking. But I am looking into the interactions between water, climate, gender, but also between water and nutrition. And similarly to what we've heard about soil health, different foods, different crops have different water intensities, and crops themselves obviously differ by the water they need to be grown, but also it depends where we grow those crops. So we grow it in the Amazon forest or in North Africa or in Asia. So the challenges differ across these regions. And so those are some of the questions I'm looking into. Thanks.
That's interesting. We've had a lot of conversations at the Chefs Manifesto about local and what localized food system versus globalized food system, and what does local mean in different parts of the world, like what crops you should grow in certain parts of the world more intensely because of the climate, geography, all these other things, and then how you do that. So that's fascinating. It sounds like there might be some threads there of insight that you have. And Christopher.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Chris Benet, and I'm speaking from Cali, Colombia. So good evening, Shakuntala, and good morning, Claudia, and good afternoon to Paul and the other people, which I believe are mainly in Europe. So this is a really global discussion. So this is exciting. So I'm working for one of the other centers of the CGIAR, which is called the International Center for Tropical Agriculture. Also, I should note that although there's the name agriculture in the name of the center, I'm not a farming specialist. I'm more of interested in what I call the interaction between research, policies, and societies. So in other terms, I'm trying to understand how research can help the policymakers make more adjusted or appropriate decision for the good of the societies. And by societies, I mean obviously the people, but also the environment. And within this, I've been working recently on issues of food security and poverty reduction, and food system and resilience, which is probably part of the reason why I'm in this panel.
Awesome. Well, we do have a chef I can see online from Colombia. And we have a very active group of chefs that had an event earlier today in Colombia. And so we'll have to make some connections there, because the chefs are getting very active in Colombia. So shout out to Chef Daniel, who's online as well. So let's jump into this topic. So resilience, and what I wanted to understand a little bit was, how do you approach a topic of resilience from a scientific perspective? What does that involve? You're all coming at this slightly from different perspectives. So I'm really interested to hear, like, how do you come at that from that perspective? Do you want to go first, Claudia?
Yeah, I mean, maybe just quickly. So, you ask a scientist about resilience and you can go on for hours. So I think the first question is, the resilience of what do we want to manage? So, so there is socio-ecological resilience, there's ecological resilience. Let's maybe just take food systems, a very broad term. I think all the chefs can relate to that. We've just had the COVID-19 shock, that it was a disease and an income shock. So not necessarily a direct food system shock, but it certainly affected food systems. So I guess one question is, did the food systems that got certainly affected parts of the system by COVID-19, did they retain functionality? So could, all people, or at least most people, still access food? I think we can give it a tentative yes, but certainly not everyone. Then the second question is, how long does it take, let's say, the food system to recover from this particular shock? So I guess that's another question. And again, the answer will depend by country, by region, public. So I think both the governments had a strong role and have a strong role to play, civil society, all of us, but also, in parts, the private sector. And I think the third component of resilience that we would be interested in is, to what extent once the system comes back, let's say the food system after COVID-19, will it be better? Will it be stronger, right? There's now a lot of work going on building back better. And the question is, to what extent do we have the energy, the resources, and the political will to make this a better food system? And I think everything we've heard today already would be components for a more resilient food system. So that's my very quick, very generic response. Thank you.
No, it's great. Chris, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, I think Claudia just touched on some important aspect. If I were to start by a joke, I would say, oh, resilience is a very complicated, you need a lot of mathematical formula, it's terrible. Actually, it's not true. The way scientists deal with resilience is actually very, very close to what a layman will understand by resilience. Resilience is basically the ability of people individually or collectively to deal with adverse events. So the example that Claudia gave about the COVID is a good one, but obviously when we talk about the food system, it's important to realize that, yes, different actors along or within the different component of that food system are affected by different type of shock or stresses. And what is very important to understand is, at least the way I explain resilience is really a key ingredient, like a cooking ingredient, is to understand people. And the way people respond to a particular shock is fundamentally what resilience is about. Because what you observe is that when people are affected by those shocks, they make decisions. And some of those decisions have actually long-term implications. A very simple example would be a farmer that loses crop may decide as a kind of response to the shock to reduce their expenses in health or even in food. And that has long-term implications for the members of the family. So when you work on resilience, you try to reduce the propensity of those people to adopt those bad responses, and you try to help them adopt better, more appropriate responses. And in the work that we do on a daily basis for us scientists is effectively try to find out what are those better responses, on how we can again reduce the risk of poor people in particular who don't necessarily have as much choice as us to engage in those more detrimental long-term strategies. That's what resilience is about from our perspective. Yeah,
no, absolutely. So Shakuntala, what do you want to build on in that in any way? And I'm keen also then to get you to talk a little bit about an ingredient that I think you brought a couple of props along.
Yes, I'd really like to build on what Claudia and Chris said. So one of a major factor for me when I think about resilience is balance. And when you talk about balance, I'm talking about balance with respect to production systems of foods, but balance also of the foods that you have on the plate that make the plate of food diverse, nutritious, and of course it must be safe. We do know that the food systems we have today are imbalanced, that quite a lot of it's focused on land-based crops and land-based foods. And there is not much there's not much importance given to foods from under the water. And if we look at the production systems of today, only 20% of the water systems are used for food production. So if we would take full advantage of that and use the possibility of water systems for producing food, then we would be making a more balanced system, and a more balanced system would, under all accounts, be also more resilient.
Yeah, no, that really addresses one of the questions that we saw, which was around, how or to what scale can aquaponic fish and salad farms contribute to localizing food supply chains? You answered that very, very, very well. So I want to shift to ingredients, and I wanted to see if you could each think about a particular ingredient within your work and an important element connected to resilience. Do you want to start first with the ingredients that you bought?
Yes, Paul, I'll do that. So
Okay.
the ingredient that I've selected as a resilient ingredient is dried small fish. And as we all know, small fish, both from marine and from inland water bodies, are bountiful. I mean, just take the Great Lakes of Africa. And in many countries, these small fish in the seasons of plenty would be dried. And why do I say it's a resilient food? It's resilient food. It's being dried. It can be kept for a long time. It has a long shelf life. It does not require refrigeration. You can transport it for long distances to remote population groups. It's it's a superfood. You remove the moisture content, so your nutrient concentration is ×5. And you can very easily add it to recipes, vegetables, soups, porridges, making the foods that you eat much more balanced, much more nutritious, and you can have it for long periods.
Wow. Absolutely, that's amazing. I know we used to use dried fish all the time in different ingredients, different food, different dishes as a nutrition additive, to really build in into meals and also to add flavor.
As you said, Paul, when you add it to a recipe, it's not cooked on its own. It's cooked in a recipe, so it brings with it other foods, vegetables. Spices, and then when you want to share it among family members, it's easily shared by being small.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Chris or Claudia, do you have an ingredient you want to talk to?
I mean, if I could, so as I mentioned, I work on water, so I wouldn't say it's necessarily it's certainly an ingredient under great stress from pollution and overuse, and the fact that it doesn't grow. I mean, we're adding very little water to the planet. We add a lot of people to the planet. So water, I've seen your chef cooking and risotto with nettles, and there was a lot of water. There was a lot of water that went into growing the rice. Your chefs, I don't know if they're aware of that. So that was definitely the largest, I think, water part, just actually to have grown the rice that then goes in the pot and more water is added. So the rice actually grows, becomes larger through this steaming, boiling process. The nettles also used water. And obviously, and more water was added probably to make this nettle puree. And actually water itself is an important ingredient, and it has important nutrients, calcium, magnesium, fluoride. So I think it's very important for all of us to understand the crucial importance of water for nutrition. So, and obviously even after I think the chef was done with cooking and the meal, you kind of need water to clean the dishes. So you need to clean water, for your hands after you're done, hopefully, soap and water. So I think I just wanted to bring this up. There is no food without water, and there's no food security without water. There's no resilience, without adequate access to good quality and sufficient water at all times. So, you know, the chef could just open his tap. Many millions of people cannot do that yet. And so I think, you know, anything we can do to improving water security would help our food system and everyone in the world. Thank you.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I mean, we've had Nayata, who was on, she's based in New Delhi, and she's been really promoting millets because of the way that they use 1/5 of the water of rice. And obviously with India having the water issue. So it's really interesting because sometimes ingredients like water are ingredients that we can almost take for granted in that sense around some of these things, but they're absolutely critical to so many things. So Chris.
Yeah, I was looking earlier some of the Instagram that some of those chefs have posted on identifying what they identify as their resilience ingredient. So in that line, I was working recently on how people in Philippines have bounced back after some of the typhoon. And one of the critical crops that play actually a role in that process is those root on tuber crops, in particular cassava and sweet potato. And the reason is because they grow on the ground, which means that when the typhoon hit and everybody's losing their rice and their corn, actually those on the ground crops can actually have been protected and help people in terms of food security in the aftermath of the typhoon, and help them also in terms of creating income, which they need again after. So, but for the, you know, without necessarily going too technical, I would call the resistant. So the resistant crops contribute to the resilience of people. Maybe it's nuances that we academics like to play with, but for me, it's an important one. Nevertheless, I think that's, you know, it's important to understand that when we talk about resilience, so the components that the chefs were mentioning are contributing to it. Water system and the access to water, as Claudia, is another aspect. So resilience is really, as I said initially as a joke, is a complex concept where a lot of different components can contribute to, and it's very important to keep a kind of systemic or holistic, as we call them in the science, that kind of comprehensive approach, because very different elements in your system can actually contribute to it. And again, understanding the way people use those different ingredients or those different components is actually improving our capacity to help them strengthening their resilience.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I mean, each of the ingredients you've talked about, and the ones that the chefs have even talked about, they each come, you know, it shows the biodiversity that we have in this world, and it also shows the different perspectives, but it's how they then interact with each other, how they connect. It's really, really interesting. And I think there can be always, you know, unintended consequences, but then it's how you counteract them and how you engage with them. And I think this is part of the resilience, which is the adaptation and the way that things move. We're coming to time, but I wanted to ask you, so what topic or aspect of your work are you really keen to talk to chefs about? And, you know, how does your work connect to the work of chefs? Obviously, you're working more in the production side, but then what are the connection points? And is there anything that you kind of want to leave chefs thinking about? Go, Chris, jump in.
Yeah, sorry, not that I want to speak before ladies, but I was also looking at the manifesto that those chefs put together, and I would like to move from or make the bridge between the resilience and the sustainability of food system. And I was very, very happy to see that in the 8 components of their manifesto, they don't simply talk about food safety, they don't talk about just biodiversity, they also talk about livelihood. And I think for people that work in the hotel, restaurant industry, food system, it's very, very important to acknowledge the fact that one dimension of sustainability is related to that social dynamics and the inequity that is characterizing the food system. As you probably know, agriculture is the largest sector in terms of number of forced labor and child labor. And when we talk about the sustainability of food system, we need to push as well for that social dimension. A system cannot be sustainable if you have inequity and if you have people who are exploited in it. And moving down to even like if in UK, in London, a large majority of the people that work in restaurants are under those 0-hour contract. They are, those migrated from East Europe that come to UK to find a job and actually not benefiting from the system. So it would be fantastic if the chef were also pushing one step further in embracing even further that social dimension or economic dimension of the sustainability. That would be really, really great.
Yeah. No, it is something that we talk about a lot. And even during this COVID time, there's been a lot of work there. It's been very tough in certain parts of the world where there's not the safety nets for restaurants. And many chefs have had to do an awful lot to really, keep their staff fed, let alone employed and getting livelihood. So it is something that we do see, and it's something that we're trying to address and raise. In certain parts of the world, it is very challenging, but it's a really good point. Who wants to go next?
I can go, Paul.
Okay.
So I'd really love to work with your group of chefs on some very concrete actions. I'd really like to travel with some of them. For example, take them to the wetlands of Sunamganj in Bangladesh, or to the Mekong Delta in Cambodia, where we can work together with women and with families to develop products. And I'd like to show two of the products that I would really like us to do. If you would take this one here, it's my grandmother's recipe, where it's a mango chutney, but where I've removed the mango and instead of mango added chopped dried fish. So it's now a fish chutney, and this can be used as a condiment in a meal, which really boosts the nutrition of women. If you would, for example, use it for pregnant and lactating women. In this part of the world where I am, and in Asia, a mango chutney is extremely suitable because it's culturally acceptable. If we would move to Africa, we may have to find another product. And the other one that we've developed, and this is in Africa, in Malawi, it's from the dried small fish, just the fish powder. This 1 teaspoon meets the dietary requirement for vitamin B12. And B12 is extremely important for growth development, but very much important for cognition in children. So if I could work with chefs to develop products that are affordable, that taste desirable and taste well, and that are culturally acceptable, then we could put them in the everyday diets of women and children. We'd be nourishing this generation and other generations to come.
That's amazing. That's great. I'm sure there'll be chefs lining up for this. And I'm serious. I'm not joking. Claudia.
Yeah, not much to add here. So, but we are a food policy research institute, and we are doing and informing and guiding a lot of social and behavioral change communication. So that could include cooking demonstrations and nutrition messaging that lots of IFPRI and other research has found has to accompany other interventions. So we can help design an irrigation system, but if farmers and households don't exactly know what crops are not only profitable but maybe also improve community nutrition, then we have a big disconnect. So there are a lot of programs and obviously findings that such behavioral change communication is essential. It has to go on all the time, repeat. And again, if we can find chefs in the regions where we work, in the countries where we work, I think we've heard many countries mentioned already, Malawi, Colombia, etc. So if we can link them to these behavioral change communications that governments are already implementing, but often need to be strengthened and often need to be much better linked to other agriculture investments. I think that would be a great next step. Thank you.
That's great. Well, we've come to time. I need to hand back to Arthur, but I just want to say a really big thank you to all three of you coming in from different parts of the world. This has been super insightful. I know there's some links coming into the chat on just some stories. If you want to put links to your organizations in there, I know that if people online want to check out CGIAR, I know that CGIAR has an Instagram account. I think it's called One CGIAR. Maybe we can put that in the chat as well. But have a look. There's lots of reports coming out, lots of insights there that if you're trying to dig into a particular ingredient or a particular conversation, there may be research that you can access. And what I really think that's absolutely critical is to make sure research doesn't get stuck, out in research just by itself without kind of getting to people that really need to learn about this stuff and think about it. And so how we make those connections and bridges is really key. And I think this is hopefully the start of a number of conversations and collaboration. So thank you. I really appreciate your time, and I'm going to hand back to you, Arthur.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Shank, and thank you, Christoph. Really insightful and very important that chefs hear what you have to say. I think, Christoph, your point about understanding the economies of food, making us more resilient is essential. Water, vital. And I can't wait to make a fish chutney. I definitely need to make a fish chutney. Now, we need to move on. We are going to move on now to a video that part of the Chefs Manifesto Action Hub, his role is also shares the action space with the World Food Programme. And the World Food Programme doing some, well, as you know, the World Food Programme, those of you who didn't know, won the Nobel Peace Prize only a few days ago, actually about 2 weeks ago. And so what's been really interesting about the winning of the Nobel Peace Prize for the World Food Programme is it sort of identifies that food is a wonderful tool for peace. And part of my role with Omved Gardens, but also from the planetary thing with the World Food Programme, is that I'm the advocacy chef, one of the advocacy chefs of the World Food Programme. And we host a number of different events called the Chef's Table. And recently we went to look at a school kitchen garden to look at nutrition for the school meals program, which is provided by the World Food Programme. And we met David. And David is one of the team leaders for the World Food Programme. And he's spent some time in a garden in Benin, West Africa, looking at the product that's grown, how it makes it resilient, the importance around communities and the social aspect of gardening and food production. So we're just about to step into a video which is about 7 minutes long. So, and Christoph is a wonderful storyteller. So please listen into what David's got to say, because there's some really insightful stuff here, and it's very close to all of our hearts. The World Food Programme, children's school feeding program. Please watch the video.
Good morning, everybody. My name is David Adomau. I'm program assistant and also focal point for the implementation of the school meals program through the integrated approach with the short-term partnership with WFP. This morning, we are in the repertory of one school called Agontime. Agontime is a school located in the commune of Atieme, department of Mono. This department is located in the southern region of the Benin. As you can see in this midday, the school children are taking a special meal called in local language atasi. Atasi is a meal made with two main ingredients. We have the rice and we have the beans. This food is accompanied with a soup made with tomato, pepper, and we add in this soup a small fish called in French fretin. So that's the meal the school children are taking in this midday for their lunch. The school meal program is an important program for the country because this program is contributing to alleviate the high rates observed for malnutrition and food insecurity. In 2017, WFP with the national government have conducted two national surveys. The one is related to malnutrition status and the second one related to food insecurity. So the main result coming out from this survey show that the department of Mono is one of the departments where we observe the high rate of malnutrition and the high rate of food insecurity. When we take the malnutrition, 1 or 3 children are stunting. So that's why WFP has decided to choose among the zone of intervention this department to implement the school meals program in order to give to school children a healthy nutrition meals in order to alleviate this high prevalence of malnutrition and food insecurity among this community, among these departments. We are in the school garden of the Agontime school. Here we have this school garden, modern school garden developed with the implication with the local community. Through this garden, WFP has decided to make things different in order to have a school garden working through all year. So, as you can see at the background, we have a local community member who is one of the responsible for the management of this garden. So at the beginning, we sat down with this community in order to decide what are the seeds we have to grow in this garden and how we are going to manage this garden in order to make this garden sustainable as much possible. So all the things we are doing here is the implication with the local community. So we contracted with the Ministry of Agriculture in order to train these community members who are going to be in front of the activities of the garden. They have been trained about the agricultural itinerary. They have been trained about how they are going to manage all the resources that will be coming out after the salt of the product or the crops we are developing here. So about the income that we will get after the salt of the crops, we decided to cut into 3 these incomes. So one part will be used interest or to pay as an income the 3 persons responsible for the managing of this garden. And the second part will be used for the management and to buy the kerosene to the generator that is over there to make this system of water available in the garden. And the third part will be used to contribute to the activities of the school canteen. So that's why the way we decided to manage this garden. So we have the implication of the local community. And through this activity, as you can see, the local community, they are getting job with this activity of garden. And also about the crop, one part is used to the school meals in order to improve the quality of the meal served to the school children by the fresher vegetables. And also about the vegetables, we have the moringa tree, that is the special tree, very rich in protein and micronutrients in order to better improve the nutritional state of the school children. So that's the way we are developing school garden through this partnership with Shoitram Foundation and WFP. Let me emphasize on something regarding the relation with this garden and the school meals we are making this school. So one part of the crop that we are getting in this garden will be used to the kitchen to be used for improving the nutritional quality of the foods that we are giving to the school children. So these fresher vegetables that are very rich in micronutrients, and also we have a special tree called moringa. So the moringa tree is also used as a vegetables in order to improve the nutritional quality of the food we are serving to the school children. So that's the very important link that we can make with this school garden with the improving of the nutritional status of the school children, because their food are very improved with fresher vegetable what we get in this garden. The local community are very involved in these school garden activities. So through this implication, this involvement of the local community, we are creating a job, a local job for the local community. So through this activity and the selling of the crops that we are getting in the garden, they have money in order to better face the malnutrition issue, in better to face the situation of food insecurity. We are contributing through this program to better improve what we call the food insecurity in the local community, this local community, and the nutritional status of the households. WFP, through this activity, are contributed to alleviate at the local level the rate of the food insecurity and the rate of malnutrition about a vulnerable community such as the community of Agontime. WFP also is try to work on the community resilience. You know that the resilience of the community is a very important thing, where WFP is trying to build this local resilience of the community through this kind of activity.
Okay, how fabulous. I'm going to drop this video back on again. That's David down there in Benin, part of the World Food Programme team there. Just some brilliant content around how do you make school kitchen gardens in the school feeding programs more, not only resilient, but it's getting children to understand food, getting people to understand food a little better. And understanding food and the farming industry is probably part of Tim Mead's everyday thoughts. Even when you sleep, Tim, I'm sure you're thinking of how to better your grass and how to make your dairy even better every day. I'd like to introduce everybody to Tim Mead, who is, in fact, from my opinion, you run and create all the amazing, delicious produce that YeoValley produces. Tim, but could I ask you to introduce yourself just quickly, and then we can maybe jump into a few Q&As.
Okay, my name's Mead, and I've been a yogurt man for 33 years, which is a fair time. And we're based in Somerset in England, and effectively been running a business now, milk from 100 organic farmers at the southwest. We've got our own, we farm 2,000 acres. We've got sheep, dairy cows. We've got our own, grow some barley cows, and we have times ambition to get % of the dairy farmers farming. For we're not fussed whether we do all of that in and stuff. Like it if we do, but I think for us, 10% British farmers farming would be fantastic. So I've done, years of my was factories and beans and and sockets and that sort of stuff. And in the last 5 years, intending to concentrate more on the farm side. So I'm not a farming expert, but I love farming. I love cows. I love British Frisian cows. Love the soil. That's basically, so I'm lucky I've got careers. My first career was manufacturer. My second career is being involved with the family. Did you hear that?
Right. Tim, that's fantastic. Thank you for the introduction. We seem to be losing you a little bit. I don't know whether it's my connection or yours. We'll have to see how the next question goes, but we're only catching about half of what you're saying. But what I'd like to do first, Tim, your point about understanding and working in the food industry for such a long time and being passionate about dairy, and like you say, you're a yogurt man. It's fair to say that we need to be more resilient in these days, and part of this resilience is understanding the stresses and pressures that are being put on the food industry, both by pandemics, by Brexit, the up and coming, Britain leaving the European Union. Could you tell us a little bit about how that would affect, your production, or how farming in Britain will need to become more resilient because of the stresses and pressures that are going onto it?
I think the thing that's come out of the pandemic to me that is interesting is that the UK got to a stage where half of our areas were being consumed out of the house, and the half areas were being in our house, and spent 6 months where 70% calories were being consumed in home, and we reduced waste by about 80%. So the fact that it wasn't being produced in restaurants and shops and cafes and all that stuff, just meant that food waste has been, for a short period of time, was reduced by about 6%. You hear me or?
Just need to check. I'm not sure if you're picking me up, Tim, but can we make sure the rest of the team are picking this up? Paul, can I check, and Barbara, are we losing Tim, or is everyone hearing it and not me?
We're hearing him. It's a little broken, but we're hearing Tim. Okay. It just seems a little broken, Tim, on your end. I'm not sure why. Maybe even Tim, if you turn your video off, it might help with the audio.
Yeah, Tim, I wonder maybe for us to maybe capture all of what you're saying, the video. Yeah, there we go. So, yeah, a few people here are saying it's difficult to hear you. So hopefully the video going off will bring it back. Okay, well, so from a perspective of chefs and narrating resilience inside their businesses and people at home consuming food, what, Tim, is the message that you'd like to give chefs and consumers around resilience, and how should we be leaning in or supporting the agricultural sector?
I think the resilience is the choice of your ingredient. So everybody's totally conflicted between, I think we've got to look at things on a more low level, and it might be as Western European versus North American or South American sort of perspective. So the thing that we're associated with which is dairy, is that there is a way that Ireland, Britain, North France, Germany, Denmark, that is absolutely brilliant for producing grass. Rainfall, there was various conversations about rainfall earlier on, and for us, rain is just not an issue. It's not a problem, and therefore we talk about local, and sometimes people think, oh, is that 5 miles or 10 miles? Whereas actually we should look about the soil you've got, geographic area, rainfall, and if you produce food that does well in those areas, then you'll be much more resilient in trying to grow things that you're forcing to grow. And that's sort of farmer's perspective.
So, from a sustainability standpoint, Tim, when you're working, with a company like YeoValley, you're looking to build sustainability into your narrative. Is sustainability more a long-term discussion, whereas a resilience would be more short-term and immediate? From one season to the next, you're having to focus on soil health, on precipitation, on sunshine. And so what's the difference, would you say, between resilience and sustainability? It's a tricky question, but it'd be really interesting to hear what you say.
I think last year there's been a lot of talk around regenerative organic farming. There's a lot of talk about the effect that agriculture has on climate. I just think it's such a big issue that you've got to get to the bottom of what is the right and the wrong thing. There is a train of thought going through. I think if you read and listen to the information there, is sustainability and sustaining the current system. The current system is not right, means that the word sustainability in question. So obviously, if most agriculture at the moment is sustainable, then sustaining the system is not the right thing to do. That's where you sort of introduce the regenerative organic farming, and I think we've got to really make a shift from the based agriculture we've been for the last 50 years. And therefore it is a matter of soil, not, you build nutrients in, you've got to look after soil, use the soil, the carbon, as opposed to grow as many crops as you can always fertilize. But that really will be sustainable. That's a sort of a tricky answer. But the sustainable question for
Sorry, Tim. It seemed to be that we've lost some type of connection to you, Tim. I'm very sorry. It looks like
we can leave the meeting and come back in, and if that helps it, if that helps.
That could help. Also, you could also dial in with the phone number.
I'll leave the meeting and come back in first.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
It won't be long.
Thank you very much. Right. So while Tim is dialing back in, please excuse us. These Zoom webinars are going global via satellite and internet. Everything relies on digital now. But I think what's important is that we try and link to the agricultural systems from as chefs into what's coming out of the soil. How healthy is the soil, and how resilient is the product that we're then getting brought to us and putting on our menus. But it's not just about chefs, it's about people in the home, it's about people cooking food and people eating food. So how do we lean into the system and support it? Tim has got obviously some great words to share, but hopefully we can get him. Tim, are you dialed in and being able to communicate?
I can hear you. You hear me?
Okay, well, got you. That sounds a bit clearer. I'm guessing it's just been a dial in and dial out. The old switch on and switch off again thing.
Yep.
Hit it as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So effectively, I think there is a way of farming and producing food that can do both: produce healthy, nutritious food, and also have reverse climate change by using as the place to pick up all the carbon. It's cool, but it's just the scale at which take us to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, it is absolutely essential that we, kind of accelerate through the gears of localism. But I think if everybody, I mean, we've got such a global audience here that if everybody locally is pressing these sustainable, resilience, holistic, planetary healing buttons for food and agriculture, then we should be on a winning curve. Are there any alarm bells ringing for you, Tim, or any things that we need to watch out for? And we're going to move on from this interview. Hopefully, we'll be able to get some final words from you. What is it should we be looking out for, and what's important for us now as we step forward in maybe the next 18, 24 months?
I think there is a huge danger that I don't sound boring or boring, but the ability of large companies to do good and if large companies do bad has never been greater. There are some big companies that put all behind regenerative farming. It's to Kellogg's, Generals, all beginning raising to put reason, time and effort into helping the situation. There are also companies that are looking to own the crops that produce, own the G cattle that we and that is the danger that I see, is that companies will scale and muscle try and earn the very heart of what we're trying to use.
Tim, I think what you're saying there is that it's important that big business takes responsibility and steps forward and becomes almost leaders in the field rather than waiting for the general population, general public to try and make decisions around sustainability or ethics or resilience of food. I agree. I do think that big business needs to step up and lead now. So hopefully that's captured what you've said, Tim, but unfortunately it's really broken up and I've only really been able to hear every other word. But really interesting though that, you know, big business needs to lead. So Tim, thank you very much for your input. I really appreciate your time and for joining us for the Chefs Manifesto Resilience sessions. We're moving along rapidly and I think we're just about on time. Well, Paul and I managed to, well, Paul, maybe you can come on and we can introduce this together, because originally we wanted, I was watching something called Kiss the Ground. Paul also watched Kiss the Ground. And we sort of said, God, that was fantastic, wasn't it? And at one of our Chefs Manifesto meetings, Karen was also there. And she said, wouldn't it be fantastic if we could get that farmer, you know, Farmer Gabe Brown in on this? And Paul said, oh, I might just know just the person. And suddenly we got Gabe Brown on interview. I was standing upstairs from here at midnight in the dark. Paul was middle of the morning and Gabe was somewhere in North Dakota doing the interview with bright sunshine. So here is an interview.
It was snowing, wasn't it? It was snowing.
Somewhere, I can't remember where it was snowing. But Paul, do you want to just quickly introduce Gabe Brown? I mean, it was a fabulous interview and we're just about to roll it. It's 25 minutes long, 26 minutes long, but this is really worth listening to.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen the movie Kiss the Ground, it's definitely worth seeing. But Kiss the Ground, it really talks about the importance of regenerative agriculture and soil. And Gabe is a rancher who's based in Bismarck, North Dakota, and has really learned from this space and is starting to be one of the key voices in this conversation. And so Gabe came on very graciously to have a bit of a chat with Arthur and I about what his perspective was around this. So if you haven't seen the movie, hopefully this will inspire you to check it out after this. But if you have seen the movie, hopefully this will remind you of some of the messages and how they relate particularly to chefs as well. So let's go to the clip, Arthur. Okay, well, it's super exciting to have a special guest with us who is literally working on the ground at the forefront of driving resilient food future. And so it's really great to be here with Chef Arthur Potts Dawson and with Farmer Gabe. Farmer Gabe, do you want to just introduce yourself and maybe just tell us where you're based and what you do?
Sure. So thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. My name is Gabe Brown, and along with my wife, Shelley, and son, Paul, we have a 5,000-acre farm and ranch near Bismarck, North Dakota. We raise grass-finished beef, grass-finished lamb, pastured pork, free-range laying hens for eggs. We have broilers. We have honey. We do vegetables. We've started an orchard, have some fruit trees. And our focus is on regenerating ecosystems to provide nutrient-dense foods to society.
Wow, amazing. And you recently, we first came across some of your work in a little film that's on Netflix at the moment called Kiss the Ground. Tell us how you got involved in that.
Yeah, so that was actually started about 6 years ago, and it was actually filmed. They did the filming at my place. They were here a number of times, 4 and 5 years ago. So it's taken a while, but we were contacted. When I say we, myself and one of my business partners, Ray Archuleta, were contacted by Josh Tickell, the producer of Kiss the Ground, and because they had read about what we were doing as far as regenerating soil ecosystems and the work with soil health. And so they asked if they could come and film at my farm and then at one of our Soil Health Academy schools And so that started down that process. And it was really a wonderful journey. It was educational on all fronts. We learned a lot about what consumers are looking for. And I think Josh will tell you, they learned a lot about soils and ecosystems.
Great.
Hey, Gabe, I'm just going to jump in quickly here.
Sure.
From the Chefs Manifesto perspective, when I watched Kiss the Ground, it was just from a chef looking at soil, understanding really where food comes from, is the most essential thing that chefs can connect to. And so we've got probably 40 or 50 chefs watching right now, and really wanted to get a sense of, from the farmer's perspective. We talked food, but where does it come from, and how resilient can it be, and what's the importance of soil? And I saw what you're doing with cover crops, and they are probably the strongest contender for simple soil strengthening and resilience, which is what we're talking about and have been talking about in the past 6 weeks. But simple soil strengthening and resilience. Can you tell us a little bit about why resilience is essential, and how it can help us to transform our food systems?
Sure, that's a great question. And one needs to understand first how soils function. Okay. You cannot have healthy soil without living plants. Plants take in CO2 and nitrogen and other elements out of the atmosphere. They use part of that through photosynthesis. They use part of it for growth, and they pump the rest out through their roots as root exudates to feed biology. And this is where agriculture in general has gone so wrong. We have not focused on that living plant feeding biology. And a lot of people don't realize plants have the ability to send out root exudates to attract specific biology to bring them nutrients, certain nutrients. And it's absolutely amazing. Plants have the ability to communicate with each other and to attract biology. And how do we get our nutrition? It's through plants in one form or another. Healthy plants, you got to have healthy soil, healthy plants, healthy animals, healthy people. And so what we focus on is using in a cropping system, using those very diverse cover crop mixes to feed this soil biology in order to get truly nutrient dense food. So many people look at nutrients and they think, oh, protein, carbohydrates, etc. No, it's all these phytonutrients. It's, the alkaloids and terpenes and all these different compounds that really drive human health. And as a chef, that's what drives flavor. And it's amazing to people. We direct market all of our products that we grow and raise on our farm. And people will consume, like, for instance, our pastured pork, and they'll say, well, I've never tasted pork like this. And I say, well, you're really tasting the soil. And it's different. My pork's going to taste different than pork raised in England, because of the soil and how that soil functions. And so my goal, and my sons and families on our ranch, is how do we produce the foods that are highest in nutrient density in order that humans can enjoy real health?
It's amazing. It's amazing.
There's also something that was so striking, Gabe, about what you presented on this documentary, which was the two differences between this sort of desertification. There's this one field, your neighbor had this field which is almost like a desert, and then you looked across at yours and there was this sort of amazing cover crops. You saw the health in the soil there. And then I sort of really kind of got a picture that with an ecological desert can be connected almost to food deserts that appear in cities, because we have huge areas of poor food shops and sugary, salty, fatty foods. They have fast food outlets just firing food into kids as they come out of school. And diversity of plant species in a field should be reflected by diversity of plant species available in cities. And can you tell us a little bit more about your work, and especially how you're protecting biodiversity and strengthening resilience on your farm and along the supply chain?
That's a great question. So realize I'm to the age now, we've turned the ranch over to our son, and he manages, and I spend my time traveling extensively. I was on the road 282 days last year. I can't even tell you how many cities, 242 flights. I know that. So that's a lot of miles. But the goal is to educate anyone who will listen, farmers, ranchers, consumers, organizations, the politicians, anyone who will listen as to why this is so important. And if you look at society today, everyone has certain things that they're geared to, whether it be climate change, whether it be lack of water, whether it be farm profitability, food deserts in the city, human health. Why can't we come together as a society to focus on that? Because no matter which of those you gravitate to, the answer comes through regenerative agriculture, healthy soil, healthy plants, healthy animals, healthy people. So as we focus and come together as society, we can address these issues. And one of the things that we're heavily involved with is we're actually doing significant testing of foods grown on and in regenerative soils, and comparing that to those grown and raised in the conventional model. And the differences are just mind-blowing. I mean, it's not a little bit difference. There's huge differences in many respects. And it all comes down to these phytonutrients. And as a chef, you know, that's truly where flavors come from. That's what sets dishes apart is the nutrients and the flavor of those foods. So on our farm, and ranch, we're focused on how do we heal that ecosystem using the 6 principles of a healthy ecosystem. Then we build resiliency. And as a matter of fact, just Wednesday, I spent the whole day with one of the world's foremost entomologists, Dr. Jonathan Lundgren, and we were involved with him doing insect biodiversity studies. And there's a real crisis in this country, you know, well, and all over the world, really, as far as biodiversity. If we heal the ecosystem and have the diversity, we're going to have the insect diversity. Then we can have the animal diversity, the plant diversity, and all those things lead to human health. And through that, that's how we address the food deserts. We have to change the culture. It's not about, you know, sugary foods. I was telling one person, it's been over 30 years since I've ate a McDonald's. I just don't do that. You know, once you taste nutrient dense food, those other things are unappealing, you know, because it doesn't satisfy you. It doesn't satiate you.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, the way you're kind of just framing that and connecting the flavor through to the soil is just such an important jump for people to make. And many chefs do know that, but there's so many people that are just missing out on that flavor. We've got a range of chefs from around the world. In the Chefs Manifesto, there's a network of over 800 chefs in 80 countries. And they're working towards kind of creating good food for all, working towards sustainable development goals in the work that they do. So what would be your message on how chefs could best support the work that you're doing and their role in this resilience from farm to fork?
Another great question. I really think that it's important for all chefs to understand how we get these foods that are high in all these phytonutrients. And they need to understand it comes from the soil, the biology in the soil. You know, there's more microorganisms in a teaspoonful of healthy soil than there have ever been people that have lived on planet Earth. Think about that. I mean, a teaspoonful isn't much.
Yeah.
But what do we see, you know, so often is not all chefs, but chefs go and where do they source from? Well, they source from they might go to a farmer's market, but is that farmer there buying the vegetable from tilling the soil? If you till the soil, you're destroying the home for all that biology. That's one of the worst things you can do. You know, we get a lot of people coming to tour our ranch, usually over 2,500 during our short summer months. And the first thing I do, I don't care what group they are, I take them to our garden and I show them our garden has been no-till for over 25 years. And we follow all the soil health principles in that garden. Because if they can relate to that and see the importance of that, that's how the whole cycle starts. That's how you truly produce nutrient-dense foods. So my answer to that question is simply understand, educate yourself as to how healthy ecosystems function, and then you source your products, your ingredients from those producers who are following those practices and who have healthier ecosystems.
Yeah. Now this ties back.
Do you mind if I jump in?
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, Gabe, I think it might be nicer just to freestyle a bit now. I mean, we've asked you some pretty tricky questions and you've answered them unbelievably. But I mean, to be able to look at, you know, sustainability as a long-term narrative, you know, the Sustainable Development Goals, they were 15 years long, we've got 10 years to go. It seems as if there's still not that much speed or momentum happening. I appreciate that, you know, this is the decade of action, but you know, resilience and the importance of in these stressed times with food and the pandemic that's affecting the world, you know, in some way, are we accelerating fast enough? What are the things that we need to do with the right narrative to speed this up? Because it seems like it's sort of not going fast enough.
Yeah, and realize I have been down this path 25 plus years, and I've been out traveling a lot for nearly 20 years, trying to educate as many as I can. The last 3 years, especially, it's just warp speed. And let me give you this as an example. My 3 business partners and I, we have 2 businesses. One's Understanding Ag. It's a consulting company. And the other is a nonprofit called Soil Health Academy, where we educate as to how healthy ecosystems function. We started these businesses 4 years ago, just from scratch with the dream to come together because we all farm and ranch. Well, now we're approaching 21 million acres that we're consulting on. So it may not seem like it's growing rapidly, but trust me, it's growing now. The snowball's finally rolling downhill. COVID is only accelerating that at warp speed because unfortunately, you look at those who succumb to COVID, it's from a suppressed immune system. Well, that's directly related to gut health. It's directly related to what we're eating. So what we're seeing now as a business is we're having a lot of multinationals and businesses contacting us within the food industry. Okay, how do we get our suppliers to use these practices so that we can truly produce nutrient-dense food? And so it doesn't appear that it's moving at fast speed, but it really is. You know, I'll get 200 to 400 emails and phone calls every day, and my business partners are the same. So it's happening at warp speed. The issue is the lack of education in regenerative agriculture and healthy ecosystems. That's where we really need to catch up.
And sorry, Paul, to keep hogging the questions, but you know, it's really to know that, I mean, this is a US-centric narrative you've got, Gabe, and we're looking at a real planetary discussion here because you've got chefs from all over the world, and I know they're tuning in from India, South Africa, South America, the Americas, and as a global narrative, are you seeing, you having traveled so much, are you seeing the same narrative being picked up all over, or is this an American thing? Is this a European thing?
Just yesterday I was on a Zoom meeting with a group who operates large farms in South America and Africa, and it is worldwide. Awesome. We get contacted weekly from businesses and individuals all over the world. Our team will be traveling to Germany, and We hope to travel to England too this next fall. We were supposed to come this year, but COVID put an end to that. So we postponed it till next year. We're seeing this all over. There's some great work being done in Australia. I have many friends in Australia who are have gone down the regenerative path and are leaders in this movement. So it's everywhere, but it has to be, because I tell people, you know, I can't tell you the number of times I get told, oh, but Gabe, you don't understand. It's not like that here. No, but you don't understand how soils function. Soils are soils. I don't care where I'm at all over the world. I can get these principles to work because they're the principles of nature. They're the same. We can regenerate ecosystems anywhere in the world.
So there's a light, Gabe, at the end of this tunnel that came racing at us with monoculture, with huge amounts of pesticides and fertilizers and just monocrops and Monsantos and, you know, seeds not being allowed to grow post harvest, you know, no heritage varieties. But what you're saying here is, although we come through a difficult time, that people are listening and times are changing.
They are. They're changing rapidly. And look at COVID here, even in Bismarck, North Dakota, which is about as rural as you can get. You know, we only have 730,000 people in our whole state. All of the garden centers sold out of transplants, vegetable seeds, the demand. People, hey, we don't want these food shortages, and we want healthy food. And so that's one of our goals. How do we teach them to garden in nature's image and use these principles in their garden? For crying out loud, go till your garden. That's the worst thing you can do to soil biology. Don't do that. But we can use these principles, and once they taste it, I always use the example, you know, we've all had just a vine ripened tomato out of our garden. And then you go to some of these restaurants and eating establishments, and you can't even call that a tomato, what they're serving there. You know, there's a difference, but what you're tasting is all these phytonutrients. You're tasting the soil and the biology and the health, and that's going to drive human health. That's what we need to do. You know, and with COVID, my family and I and our children, we've all had it, and it's no big deal. It didn't affect us. It didn't slow us down. Why? Because our immune systems are healthy. You know, for as much as I travel, I just rarely get sick. And if I do, it's only going to slow me down for a day and, you know, away I go. But that's because of what I eat. And that's what we need to do.
I can hear the next documentary coming, Gabe. Taste the soil.
Actually, just last week, I had a phone conversation with a philanthropist that wants to put a series together on regenerative agriculture. And we were lining out the different shows in this documentary series. And one of those is going to be geared towards chefs and how do we take this healthy soil and really create the dishes that'll drive human health. And then another one of them is going to be with doctors who truly understand that it's about what you eat. We have to start thinking of food as preventative medicine.
Yeah. Well, you've got a whole ton of chefs here lining up to be a part of your Taste the Soil documentary. If you ever needed anyone, I'm sure Paul will connect you to.
That would be great.
Yeah, fantastic. Gabe, it's just fabulous to speak to you. Paul, have you got any more?
I think the real thing I'd love to just kind of finish out on is to just really acknowledge the fact that this work is a collaboration. And I think what I've picked up from what you're saying is that we can deal with many of our issues through this one solution. So flavor, nutrition, health, climate, all these elements through caring for our soil. And these are the kinds of investments that we need at the moment to accelerate the change that's coming. So it's really, really great to hear you frame that up so well.
Well, you put it very nicely, and I call it a win-win situation. You know, too much around the world, we as individuals want to look at our pet project, so to speak, as being the most important. Why can't we all come together and realize if we work towards this common goal of regenerating our resources, it will alleviate a lot of the ills we're seeing in society today. You know, climate change, water quality, human health, and profitability on the farm and ranch, revitalizing our rural communities. I mean, I can go on and on. So why can't we work together for the common good? And, you know, right now, in case you haven't noticed, we're in the midst of a presidential election here. And it just so, it just so happens that our business has been contacted by both of the candidates to learn about regenerative ag. And I think that's a good thing. And of course, we'll talk to them both because this knows no political boundary. You know, it's important that we all get on the same page and work towards the common good.
That's great. Well, thanks, Gabe.
It's an unbelievable opportunity to really frame up resilience from the field. Gabe, when I watched the documentary last week, I was, you know, literally with tears in my eyes. And then I said to Paul, we mentioned it in our meeting last week, and Paul said, "Oh yeah, you know, I'll give him a call, see if we can get Gabe on the line." And we were like, "Yeah, sure."
Oh no.
I mean, it's just an absolute miracle. Wow. I mean, I'm just gobsmacked at being able to do both.
If you ever see me standing up, you'll know that food is one thing I really enjoy, is good food. You know, so when I heard it was chefs, I'm like, yep, I'm there. Yeah, I love what you guys are doing. How you take a whole animal and oh man, that's my favorite. Let's you know, let's really get back to eating like we should.
Well, hopefully soon we'll be able to come and maybe do a little bit of a road trip, Arthur, and go and visit the farm and gather a few chefs, and maybe we can do a big spread out at the farm with you. Taste some of that.
That'd be fantastic. Don't tease me now.
I'm serious. I reckon we could do it. We were in farmland. Where was it, Arthur? Last year, about this time, not far from, about a couple of hours past Chicago.
South Africa, outside Johannesburg?
No. When we were in Chicago, we went over into
Kalamazoo.
Yeah, Kalamazoo we were in. So it was great. I think we might have frozen. No. Okay. Great.
I think it's been really the past 2 or 3 months. Sorry, Paul, you broke up really badly then.
That's all right. I just stopped. Sorry.
Okay, just finally though, from me, you know, resilience has been on our tongues now for about 6 months. We've been talking about it. We've been trying to lift it up and put it into the spotlight. And we've done that over the past 2 months with chefs from all over the world. And to now have you frame it, sum it up, and give us a real good look at what, you know, resilient agriculture is and regenerative agriculture is, and the importance of soil. This has been probably the most amazing interview we've ever done with the Chefs Manifesto, and that's saying something because we've interviewed some amazing people. But Gabe, you know, I can only say that my heart is full having listened to what you said. So thank you so much from myself, and I'm sure all the other chefs listening in.
Right.
All right.
Good.
That finished quicker than I thought, but anyway, that's good.
There was some real insights that even just watching it for the second time after interviewing him that just keep coming up, and really that connection between flavor, I think, and soil is just so important. You know, ultimately, you know, chefs are all looking for flavor, looking to ensure things taste good, taste differently, and that connection to soil is something that is very easy to forget. And I think that's a good reminder there, just to encourage us in what we're doing.
Yep, absolutely. Well, it's interesting. I think it speeds us nicely along the journey of this session. To speak to, you know, we're just discussing, you know, huge agricultural spaces Somerset, 200,000 hectares. I know that Gabe's got, what did he say, 21 million hectares he's now advising on. I mean, we're talking about big scale agriculture, looking at resilience and regenerative agriculture, soil health, and how we can flex with the changing times on the planet. But more and more people are moving to cities. More and more people are living in high rises and connecting to the transport systems of cities, because they maybe see there's more opportunity there. And I'm not just talking about London and New York, I'm talking about China, India, Africa. You know, we have got cities now exploding with population. And one of the things that we're doing at Omved Gardens, which is the action hub space for the Chefs Manifesto, is we're growing food, and we're growing food in an urban environment. And the grower of food at Omved Gardens is Vicky Chown. Vicky, you're in Omved Gardens, I can see. I know many of the chefs here on the call have been to Omved, and so they recognise it, but you're actually there. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to talk today, now we've talked about big agriculture, to look at how we can make an urban environment, an urban landscape, and how we can make that resilient. We thought we'd talk a little bit about what Omved Gardens have been growing. You talk about the Seed Savers Network, etc., etc. But anyway, welcome, Vicky. Maybe you'd like to introduce yourself a little bit and say what you've been doing.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Arthur. So yes, I'm head of urban food growing at Omved Gardens, and I did want to take you down to our little veg garden, but anyone else in the UK knows that it's really rainy today and horrible. So I'm sat perched in our lovely kitchen greenhouse, and I'm just kind of working my way through some of the seeds that we've been harvesting this year, which is part of our chat on resilience today, is our seed saving network. So we have set up a seed saving network. Now, seeds are the beginning of all of our food systems, and ultimately, I suppose, of our human existence. We've spoken a lot about soil health today, which has been really nice and really positive to hear people talking about, and the diversity of the microbes in the soil and how important they are for growing. But there's also a real importance for the diversity of seed that we grow. And in the last 100 years, we've lost estimated 90% of our varieties of vegetable seed, of edible crop seed, which is a crying shame for many, many reasons. Most importantly, resilience. So if I have 20 varieties of bean that I'm growing, one year might be a particularly dry year, and we might have a bit of a drought. There may be one or two varieties that stick out and do really, really well in a drought year, and we can use them. There might be another year that has a very, a big infection of aphids that really affects our crop, and so on and so on and so on. So growing lots and lots of different varieties of bean or vegetables in general is going to help with our resilience and help with our food systems. Can you hear me, Arthur?
I've got to, I'm listening with all I can, I'm rapt with what you're saying. Can I just see, what's that bean you've got in your hand? That bean looks
beautiful. This is actually a bean from Karen that we got by mistake, and we're going to add to our seed saving network. So I found a load of big runner beans in the compost, and I cracked one open, and I just found these amazing purple beans in there. And Karen's actually been growing them in her own garden, and she didn't know that we could grow them, so she's brought us a load more today, and I've been shelling them to dry out and hopefully add them to the seed saving network.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
What I'm wondering is that as more and more people come to cities, Vicky, that they are going to lose their connection to soil. They're going to lose their connection to understand even what seeds are and how their heritage varieties are essential. But there are some interesting points that we'd like to make about not just Omved, but London as a city and also cities all over the world, is that there are green corridors that are required to keep nature and pollinators healthy in cities. Yeah. And how gardens, gardeners, allotments, and growers like yourself in environments like Omved Gardens can influence a resilient city and more resilience around pollination of flowers and vegetables. But the produce in a city now needs to sort of step up and begin to be counted. Is that right?
Exactly so. So, I mean, in terms of diversity in the city, if you look at something like honey, our city honeys are actually way more diverse than our countryside honeys because of monoculture and the way that we grow in modern day. And our cities often just have people with back gardens and front gardens and window boxes that plant lots and lots and lots of different types of flower. So bees can go and collect that pollen and make different types of honey. Now, that can be true of our varieties of vegetables too. So if we got everyone in the city growing, even just on a window box, even just a pot of basil, you know, that's one less pot of basil that you buy, that rubbish basil that you buy in the supermarket that dies after 2 days and has no flavor. We can really, really influence our food systems. You know, what is it, 10 million people in London? 12 million, I think. 12 million people in London. Something like that? Does that sound right?
I think there's about 8 million living or 9 million living and a lot of people who come in every day.
Registered. Yeah, registered, exactly. So there's a lot of people in London. And if we got every single one of those growing a small portion of food, imagine what we could do. So yeah, we are trying to encourage through our Seed Savers network, we are trying to encourage people to grow as much food as they can in their spaces. You know, you look at things like the Dig for Victory campaigns during the war, that really, really without them, we may not have succeeded in our efforts, you know, in our war efforts. So just taking over your front garden, not having a concrete front garden, not having a lawn in your back garden, or even just dedicating a small area of that to growing your own produce. There's 0 food miles in that. It's a few steps from your back door. You know exactly what's gone into it. There's going to be way, way higher nutrition. And also it's fun. It's really, really fun. It's really, really fun to get out and do gardening and grow things for yourself and taste the flavors. As you were just talking about before, once you've tasted nutrient-dense food, you don't want to go back to those watery tomatoes that you get from Tesco.
Now, so we're growing the produce, but in order to have the produce actually become produce rather than just flowers, we need insects. And these sort of green corridors,
yes,
these now need to have built. So it's starting at the north and running all the way through the south. I mean, London is generating green corridor, and Omved Gardens, which is the action hub of the Chefs Manifesto in London, is a part of that green corridor. But can you talk about the importance of the pollinators in cities?
Exactly. So we, I mean, London is a very green city in itself. But we have actually recently been in contact with Beelines, which is a wonderful organisation, which is encouraging these green corridors. So where we are in Highgate Bowl, we have Hampstead Heath on one side, we have Highgate Woods on the other side, Queenswood on the other side, Parkland Walk just down the road, and they're just very wild areas in the city. And we, in the middle of that, are creating a lovely corridor and a stop-off point. We've got a wildlife pond, we've got a huge area of wildflowers as well, where pollinators, birds, all kinds of small animals can stop off, take some refuge until they go on to the next point. So Omved Gardens is all about that. We're not just growing food here, we're growing food in the most permaculture way we can, by supporting the nature around us as well as kind of investing in it.
And so if you were, from a gardener's perspective, Vicky, and you're just the most amazing gardener I've met, and just some of the produce that you've grown at Omved Gardens, could you tell us like maybe 10 or 12 of the varieties you've grown at Omved with success, or, you know, how does that make us resilient as a garden?
Exactly. So we have this exactly what we've been doing. We've got only a very small kitchen garden at the moment, and we are looking to expand some of our growing space as the site develops. But we are growing as many varieties of things as we can. So we'd rather at the moment do small patches of things to test their resilience in our garden and see what works for us. So for instance, behind me, we've got a load of pumpkins and squash. Can you see? So we've got some lovely pumpkin squash. I think we grew about 6 or 7 varieties of pumpkin and squash this year. 3 varieties of courgette. Ones that have done particularly well in our garden, the Coccoselli courgette, the striped Italian courgette, was amazing. It was just, I think we had about 6 plants, and we had, just didn't end. It didn't end. We were giving them away. We're like, anyone want a courgette, please? Anyone want a courgette? And I think we grew about 12 varieties of bean. The waxhorn yellow, I don't know if they're here, because I've got my seeds around me today. I'm just...
Can you show us? Can we see your seeds?
So I was just sorting out some seeds. I don't know if you can see. So I've got my box there and a load of other ones over there. Just packets and packets and packets of seeds right now.
Well, there's resilience right there. But Vicky, one of the things I was so surprised about from the Omved kitchen garden was that we had Anahita talking about millet earlier on. And I thought, oh, millet's this romantic thing that only grows in India. But actually, you grew some millet in our garden, which looked amazing. It was really big.
We had a very similar, we grew callaloo and we grew amaranth, which are quite similar. Have a similar kind of appearance as well. But yeah, and the callaloo, the amaranth didn't do very well this year, but I know it will, and I'll try again. So the thing about gardening is it's a long game. So if we have one failure, we do not give up. We continue and we persevere. And I'll grow the same crop for 4 or 5 years, unless I really hate the flavor or something, and to get a real idea of how well it does. Because as I said, drought, too much sun, not enough sun, bugs, every year is different. And that is why we are collecting for this seed saving network that we've set up. We're not just sending out seed. We're not just asking people to grow seed. We're also collecting as much data as we possibly can so that we know what seed grows well in what area, in what soil. And that can change, the microclimates across the country even can change so much. And hopefully over the years, it could take many, many years to collate this data. We'll find out exactly what grows well where and help people to grow more vibrant and kind of abundant crops.
What's really scary, Vicky, is that time swiftly passes. And I thought that we could talk forever about resilience in an urban landscape, but suddenly the timing has gone. But I thought, let's get to maybe the crux of this. Cities and growing food in cities, or what, from your opinion as a grower in a city, makes a city more resilient, and why is that important? And how can chefs help?
Sorry, the fridge has just decided to start vibrating as you said that. What creates resilience in the city? Well, there's so many factors that go into food production in the city, and it's so much more than just sustenance, calorific sustenance and nutritious sustenance. The communities that form when you grow food together, the health benefits, the mental health benefits, then there's the health and the physical health and the nutritional benefits of food growing are so numerous in such a, the cities, surprisingly, having such a being such populous places can be very, very lonely places. And I think that health, as the Chefs Manifesto talks about a lot with mental health, is so important to recognize and to form communities within your community. And growing communities is really such an amazing way to create healthy, sustainable places to live, which I think a lot of our cities, our kind of concrete jungles, are quite lacking in. So we're not only creating environmental stability, food system stability, mental health, physical health, community health. There's so many benefits to getting involved in your local community garden or allotment, or even starting something new. Any green space, there's so many green spaces in a city that need to be utilized and used.
So food systems and soil health and heritage varieties of seeds and seed saving networks actually creates societal resilience.
Exactly. It's so much deeper, and it spans beyond so much more than we can kind of comprehend or talk about in a short chat. But the benefits are just amazing, and I know that from the gardens that I've run and the teams that I've been involved with, and ones that I visited as well. They're invaluable, absolutely invaluable.
Well, we've seen pumpkins, we've seen beans, we've seen all of the seeds that you're saving. There's some questions coming in about how do you collect the data, or is it on Excel spreadsheets, and what was the season like? So people are really interested in this. I'm sure maybe Andrea, if you'd like to drop any questions in, maybe via Instagram to Omved Gardens, I'm sure Vicky can answer any questions that you have. Vicky, just before we wrap up, so we're in an urban environment, we've got soil, we've got seeds, we've got birds, there's resilience of a sort. 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, I mean, how much more have we got to flex as a growing community to be able to provide both some sustenance and better growth socially? And, how can chefs help to promote this type of, because not just London, it could be Nigeria, it could be Johannesburg, South Africa, it could be New York, it could be New Delhi. How can chefs help growers in an urban environment?
This is the thing. There's this, you can look at it from an agricultural kind of commercial point of view, as you mentioned before, and we can look at it from a very grassroots way where we start with the community and we go up. And I think just attacking things from all angles we were talking earlier about how, you know, when you're in the countryside, you drive past a farmhouse and there's an honesty box and you can get yourself a dozen eggs for £1 or £2, and how it's so easy to do it, to grab really good nutritious food. Now imagine if that were the case in London, whereby you knew that your local community, you could walk past it and you could grab a couple of courgettes and a few eggs for a reasonable price. Because the thing about London is everything goes up. The markup of prices for good quality food is unreal in London. So I suppose getting chefs to join forces with their local community gardens, with their local growing spaces, and buying direct from projects that need it. Because the problem with community gardens and growing spaces is that they're massively underfunded, but such an amazing resource. To feed a city is a big task. I mean, to feed, I think something like population of London is only 12% of the population of the UK, but in order to feed London, we have to have an entire Britain in the current way that we grow. But if we change the way that we grow and we use every space we possibly can, front gardens, back gardens, window boxes, we can completely change that and can change that food system. So yeah, chefs direct to community gardens, chefs direct to allotments if they're allowed to sell, because there's some rules about that. But I think that's how we do it from a grassroots perspective.
Vicky, I think you thank us for keeping you out of the rain today, don't you?
Yeah. I'm picking out my seeds because it's been a while since I've been able to do this, because it's been busy in the garden. Our harvests have been amazing.
Vicky, thank you so much for joining us at the Chefs Manifesto sessions around resilience. You know, talking about the urban landscape, and you know, this is not just about London, everyone. This is about Lagos, Nigeria. It is about New Delhi. It is about Johannesburg. It's about cities all over the world tuning in to be more resilient and get growing. And I think Mokadi and Anahita would echo what you said, Vicky, about mental health and the connection to, you know, resilience on the human form, not just the food. We're going to need to keep moving on. So thank you, Vicky. You got any last words, or are you going to sign off and count your beans?
Magic beans. Yes, I'm going to sign off, and thank you. This has been a really, really interesting session. I've loved watching it.
Thank you. All right, Vicky. Thanks so much. Okay, that's Vicky Chow, the head gardener at Omved Gardens. We are now coming more or less to the ending of the Chefs Manifesto sessions on resilience. Paul, I think you're going to come back in and we're going to discuss a few more things, just basically a few goodbyes. But do remember that there's going to be a chef's hour post this. So if you're a chef and you're interested to keep this discussion running, we're going to make a cup of tea and have a quick chat around the fire type thing, obviously on Zoom. Yeah, Paul, you want to dial in and say your last bits and pieces?
I'm here, Arthur. I just need my video on.
Yeah.
It's okay, perfect.
Someone is inviting you in. Nice t-shirt.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I'm still wearing this. Where's Anahita? I've still got my Chefs Manifesto chef's jacket. There's not many of these around.
No, not many of them around. They're a limited edition. No, it's been amazing to hear this conversation and hearing about the connections, you know, even as Vicky was just talking about the green spaces and the connecting points that help to enable food systems to be effective is just really interesting, because, you know, we've gone all the way from ingredients into the soil, into some of the conversation around how we communicate, how we engage people, and now we've started to talk about how does that connect with urban cities, and what can we do in those spaces? What role do we all play? What I wanted to do was just give everyone a little bit of an update just about the UN Food System Summit, which is coming up. And this is another way, I suppose, to connect and really raise some of these conversations. Obviously, for the last 6 weeks, there's been chefs talking and advocating about ingredients, but and then talking today about all the different elements of resilience. And I wanted to kind of just frame this opportunity up and give you a bit of a snapshot if you've not heard about it. But and I've just got a couple of slides. So the next slide just kind of highlights that next year there's going to be this UN Food System Summit. And basically this is a summit that's been called by the Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, to really increase the ambition or raise the ambition and increase our understanding of the issues that we need to solve, and really set a course to transform our food system. These kinds of Secretary General led initiatives are at the highest level that the UN can do. And so they're different to business as usual, and they're really called to kind of really help accelerate things. And so the Secretary General's really seen food systems as an area that we need to look at globally, not just in the food space, but as the way that it impacts all spaces. And so in order to do that, he appoints a special envoy is the way that it happens. And Dr. Agnes Kilabata, who's is from Rwanda. She was the agriculture minister in Rwanda. She now is the president of AGRA, which is a Greening Africa Forum. And she also, you know, when she introduces herself, talks often about growing up as the daughter of a farmer. And so she's been leading a whole secretariat now to pull this together. And the event's going to happen late 2021 in Rome and then New York. So there'll be in two parts, starting, you know, the first part of the event in Rome and then the second part in New York. And if we go into the next couple of, there's different ways they're driving at the moment for people to engage. And one of the things is they're looking at 5 action tracks. And these 5 action tracks have been designed to host conversations that really look at game-changing initiatives that can be put forward for the globe to kind of come around. And you'll see, you know, starting even in reverse, action track 5 is about building resilience to vulnerability, shocks and stresses, which is obviously very relevant to the conversation we're having today. Action track 4 is about advancing equitable livelihoods, which we've also touched on, the economic engine. On action track 3 is about boosting nature positive production. Action track 2 is about shifting to sustainable consumption patterns. And then action track 1 is about ensuring access to safe and nutritious food for all. So these 5 action tracks are each going to have leaders that have been appointed. They're not UN leaders, but they have UN agencies that they're working with. And they are gathering about 30 people to lead each of these groups. And that the idea is that others will then contribute through a range of different avenues. And I'll talk in a minute about one of them. So this whole summit is really about trying to get people involved. And so from a chef's perspective, this is something chefs, farmers, it's really important to see how people can get involved. And getting involved is not just, attending an event. It's actually being a part of the conversation and showing that leadership in your own community. And so our next slide just talks a little bit about how you can kind of get involved in the vision of the summit through becoming a food systems hero, which many of you are. But this is, anyone can sign up here and basically keep in touch with what's happening on the summit and then be a connector for the summit in your own community. And the hope is that then through that, there's going to be this set of food systems summit dialogues. And these are going to happen in every country in the world. There's going to be 3 levels of dialogues. There's going to be member state, which means government-led dialogues. There's going to be global dialogues at international events. And then there's going to be independent dialogues organized by anyone. And this is something, that maybe the London Action Hub wants to look at doing. And they're basically going to be giving out toolkits for people to be able to run them. And other chefs might want to run them in their own communities. But the idea is that there are a standardized approach that looks at how you can have a conversation that helps to gather insights. And it creates it in a space where people can, discuss things and explore options in a format that makes sense. And so this whole summit is really looking at trying to open that up and to create a way for globally the people that have that live in the different food systems and that benefit from them to really be able to contribute to where are the solutions and how do we move forward. So I just wanted to kind of frame this up for you. There is more information. You can go to the website. It's un.org/English. There's obviously 7 languages for the UN website. So the languages in other languages in Spanish and others. It also then has the link for the Food System Summit. we over on World Food Day last Friday, there was also another thing that you might be interested in is the global relay conversation where many chefs were involved. You can see all of that on YouTube. The Food System Summit's also on Twitter and then on Instagram if you want to follow along. But I just encourage chefs to, as part of this conversation on resilience and how we kind of continue that conversation, there is this summit coming up and it's going to have this year of dialogue. And so it's really important for us to also get outside of our conversation that we are having and really engage with different other fora and forums to really influence and bring the voice of chefs and others into that community. So I think, Arthur, you're want to jump back in, but I think I just wanted to kind of frame this up as one avenue for us to really look at as we're talking about the way forward. So
did you want me to come in, Paul?
Yes. Yeah. So,
boiling.
Pardon?
Making a cup of tea.
Oh, sorry. I went probably too fast for you.
No, it was good. It was good. I was really just actually running through the process of what the day and what we learned, what we listened to. And thank you very much for sharing that. I think it's really important. I think 2021 is going to be an important year. 2020 has been a bit of a funny one. I know for all the chefs online and anyone else who, we've all come through this C19 time. And hopefully these resilience sessions have given some kind of idea as to how food, the agricultural sector, and people who eat and people who cook can sort of work their way out and become more resilient. Because these times have changed. We really are in changed times. It's been brilliant to listen to Gabe, to Tim, to Lee, to Anahita, Mokade. I mean, everyone who's joined us. And the scientists, Paul, I thought the scientists, I was going to sort of sit there kind of going, but actually they are like absolutely banging, aren't they? They're completely on it. Water, fish. I mean, I just thought that was just really, really good.
Yeah, no, I think it's been really a good balanced conversation. I mean, in terms of takeaways, I think it's really about the interconnectedness, but it's also about the diversity, because we kind of go, well, what's the one, like I was kind of like, what's the one resilient ingredient, the most resilient? But it's not really about that. It's about different ingredients which have resilience and how you can then expand how you use them and what that looks like and the different impacts that they can have. But as soon as you kind of start to look at one, there's another, and then there's another, and then there's different for different regions and all the rest. So these resilient sessions, I know not everyone, and in the chat some people said they weren't able to get to some of them. So I think it's really great that this format enables us to actually put those links out there and for people to be able to still access that content and be part of that story, and maybe then ring you up and say, hey Arthur, I've got a resilient ingredient I want to come and cook with you and talk about, and we can kind of create some more.
What I wanted to do, Paul, and this was going to be a call out maybe in the chef sessions, but perhaps even to the people watching now. I know we've dropped a few numbers because it's been a long afternoon, but I wanted to, as an idea, I wanted to create 20 ingredients for 2020. What are the resilient ingredients in times of stress and pressure that we should be presenting as chefs to the world? Now, we've had fonio, we've had corn, we've had millet, we've had seaweed, we've had bambara nuts and stinging nettles. That's only 6. Yeah. We need 14 more. I know there's Justin out there, or Tom out there, or anyone else, Chantel, or who else is tuned in, who would like to put forward another ingredient that we can build on a resilience topic. Because if we could put it on the Chefs Manifesto website and say, hey, this was 20 from 2020. And we saw that back in 5 years' time and say, right, in a time of real difficulties for both people, business, and growing, we found 20 ingredients that were really resilient. So anyway, that's another little thing. If anyone's interested, give us your
idea.
And we'll try and cook with them, or you could put forward a recipe for it with a photograph. That'd be great. But that's 20 for 20.
What I'd love though is maybe, Arthur, you should make a menu with all 20.
I should bank of what? I should do what?
You should make a menu with all 20 ingredients.
All right. Okay. If we get 20 resilient ingredients, and Andrea's just put down mushrooms, fungi. Yes, absolutely, I agree, fungi. I will write a menu with all 20 items on it. I'm going to have to get bambara nut and fonio and millet and corn, but we can get it all, and we'll do a menu, and we'll do it in the next session in spring 2021. We'll cook the 20 from 2020.
It's awesome. And we can then, you know, people can dial in and cook along with you, and then we can all sit down and eat. I think it'll be amazing.
Well, hopefully there are some restrictions will be lifted and we'll be able to get together with some people. But I can't wait to do I'll tell you what I did want to do is I wanted to do a funio and seaweed salad, because I know that funio and seaweed were really high up there for me on sustainability. I mean, I don't mind doing the stinging nettle soup and a bambara nut burger. I thought what Mokadi put forward was brilliant. But, you know, it would be a delicious menu.
Yeah. I mean, we as part of that UN Food Systems Summit relay, we did one of the sessions. We had Chef Peter Gordon on, and he was cooking from Auckland, and he was cooking with a number of different fish. But then he brought in seaweed, and he also brought in honey from Niue Island in the Pacific. And the honey was made with one of the most pure bee stocks left on Earth. And it's the only bee stock that's not been colonized and had, you know, disease or anything come in. And he brought together seaweed, honey, and then this fish. It was just amazing to sort of see the thought process of bringing those kinds of ingredients together, which don't necessarily always line up in your brain. But this is awesome. So let's put that challenge out there. I mean, obviously there's lots of resources out there. We're going to get we'll follow up this event with stuff online in terms of all the links and all the content, so people can, if you enjoyed it, then we'll be able to make sure that you can share it with others. Check out, if you haven't, the Chefs Manifesto podcast. There's 2 seasons of the podcast there. We're recording at the moment our 3rd season. Great content there from chefs around the world, similar to this. Check out Omved on Instagram as well. It's got huge amounts of great content there. Lots of tips around. Vicky's often in the garden, Arthur's in the kitchen. There's lots of cool stuff on there. So make sure you check that out as well. So Arthur, I think we've come to the end of this session. And I think the idea is any chefs who want to gather, we have a kind of closed chef session after this. But have you got any final reflections or thoughts? This has been really something that you've been a part of right over the last almost 2 months, you know, week by week. What's kind of any final takeaways?
Well, I felt, having talked to chefs from all over the world, that there was a resilience, a communal resilience that we were discussing online. I mean, what's the great thing about the world is now has gone digital, and we're all contacting, communicating on this medium. And through that, I was getting a sense of kitchen problems in New Delhi and issues around Johannesburg communities and Lima in Peru and New York restaurants. I mean, we're looking at a global issue around changing times for chefs. And that really made me think that both from our summer sessions, which we did on the movement and migration of food, which really kind of began to hit home where food is from, how we identify with it, what we do with it, how we use it in times of getting together and communicating and becoming a sort of, you know, a family, I suppose. But I thought the resilience sessions would pull us together more as a family of chefs around the Chefs Manifesto, and inviting the guests in, general public, people who are supporting Chefs Manifesto, to come and listen to what would be a resilience discussion. And that's been happening this afternoon, but it has been for the past 6 weeks, pulling together the passion from chefs in South Africa and in India and you know, from South America. You know, we are looking at you know, a real impassioned plea from chefs to look at the agricultural system differently. And then we had farmers today come and tell us exactly what we needed to hear. So it's been really, really important, I think, for this to happen. I don't think this is the end of the resilience discussion. I think it's important that this is just the beginning, really, of us all beginning to understand what the systems require from chefs to generate change, resilient change. And I look forward to doing more. So we'll do 20 for 2020. We'll do a 2021 menu based on all the ingredients that we've focused on this year. I can only thank Omved Gardens continually for their support in what Chefs Manifesto does as the Action Hub in London. It was wonderful for the World Food Programme to bring us this video from Benin. Paul, your time has been amazing. Barbara has been unbelievable. Jenny has been great. It's been a real team behind this. And Jen's been sort of the program director, and Barbara's been supporting her. Paul, you and I, we've had an easy time of it, haven't it, without Barbara and Jen doing their work?
Absolutely.
And then
Absolutely.
Tom, who's been very busy anyway. But so thanks to everybody back of house. I think it's been really, really good. And without them, this would not have been anything. So congratulations, Jen, sitting here in the background, typing away probably. But thank you very much, Barbara. I know your work has been super full on last week. Okay, the chef's Zoom has come up in the chat. Any chefs out there, if you want to join in now, I'm going to make a cup of tea, and then we're just going to open up the discussion around resilience and any points. Hopefully I can shut up and just you lot can have a chat. Yeah, there's the link in the chat box on the right-hand side of the screen. Connor's online. Connor, I'm afraid you couldn't grab us on the panel. I'm so sorry you were busy, but maybe you could jump in and have a chat with us this afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. I'm signing off from this channel.
Thank you.